Welcome. We are very excited to be able to host you, and on behalf of Minister Friis Bach, the Minister of Development Cooperation for Denmark, Minister Emilia Perez, the Minister of Finance for Timor-Leste, let me just say welcome and thank you for participating in this discussion. It really is for us in the United States a great honor to have the opportunity to host this now third meeting of this group. The first such meeting since 45 donors, countries, and organizations came together to endorse the New Deal for engagement in fragile states. For years, we've all poured effort and energy into development, realizing extraordinary gains in some areas of the world, and hardly seeing the needle move in some others. As you know, no low-income, conflict-affected state has achieved a single Millennium Development Goal. And there's a very clear reason for this. Conflict is essentially development in reverse. It destroys capital, displaces people and homes and businesses, and scares away investment, that driver of progress. As the world has edged closer to 2015, we realize we all have to do things differently across development, but especially in fragile and conflict-affected states. Instead of designing policies and solutions here in Washington, we need to work together with committed country partners to ensure that your plans are in fact the roadmap for our investments and our efforts. Instead of measuring progress as we would in a Thailand or Indonesia, we would recognize the unique needs and challenges of working in fragile states, adapting our approach to local context. Over the last few months, countries committed to the New Deal have been working on a unique set of indicators that will help us measure effectively progress and define where we need to do a better job. These indicators are critical to our efforts to monitor and evaluate our work. Instead of assuming good policies will naturally follow from development investment, through the efforts of this group, we recognize that emphasizing transparency, market-oriented reforms, and a proactive effort to fight corruption from the get-go are critical to confidently presenting a vision of success. In Liberia, where President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf has championed New Deal principles, the Ministry of Finance now provides government budget information on the internet, over the radio, and on an electronic billboard outside of the ministry. Sometimes I feel we should do that here in Washington in front of our own Treasury Department. Importantly, these principles are not just the foundation of the New Deal, but they're also fundamental to a new approach to development that recognizes that private investment and international cooperation are part of the solution to ending extreme poverty. If the more traditional model of development was hiring a contractor to build a road, the new model of development is working with a diversity of partners, from corporations to faith-based organizations, to help nations build thriving economies and democratic society. I'd like to conclude just by noting that even as we highlight and focus on those types of success stories, part of what this group has done that is already so impressive is come together to adopt a set of principles that ensure that everybody is doing their part. Donors like the United States are trying to do things differently to invest in your institutions early and often. Private investors are brought to the opportunities earlier and with more clarity. And perhaps most importantly, your countries themselves are putting in place tough reforms in a consistent manner that sends a signal of credibility and optimism to the rest of the world. We see that in Afghanistan's TMAF, or Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework. We see it in the commitments that Somalia has made to fight corruption and ensure an openness to private investment. We see that in the commitments that South Sudan has made to embrace the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Those are the types of strong, powerful signals that give us all the capacity to do more and do more together. So I will just conclude with a thank you and a reminder that just a few weeks ago, I guess now 2 months ago, here in Washington, on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, President Obama stood before the joint session of Congress during his State of the Union address and committed the United States to helping to lead global efforts to end and eradicate extreme poverty. For us to be part of a movement to do that, we know that we need to work differently, more effectively, with greater respect and greater partnership in the countries that many of you around this table and in this room represent. That's our commitment. It will be our commitment, and we know that with your efforts here today and going forward, together we can be very successful. So thank you, and I welcome you here to Washington for this third dialogue, and now would like to introduce Minister Amelia Perez, who not only has been steadily leading this effort effectively and serving on the overall committees to define how we define success in the future, but in her own example has been someone that we can all learn from and emulate. Thank you.
And good afternoon to everyone around the table here, my co-chair as well. First of all, I would like to thank the USAID Administrator for kindly hosting this international dialogue. And I would also take this opportunity to thank all the ministers and all the senior officials of all the different countries that have taken time out from a very busy schedule to be with us here for the next few hours to discuss many issues that we bring on the table in this third international dialogue. Since the last meeting of the international dialogue in Monrovia, it was in June 2011, we have made a lot of progress. In November 2011, in Busan, we have launched a new deal for engagement in fragile states, which has now been signed by over 40 countries and institutions. Since then, we have worked very hard to translate these principles and commitments in the new deal into real change in policies, practices, and behaviors. I have been here since, I think, 2 days ago, and I attended several meetings in the World Bank and the IMF building. And I was actually in 2 panels yesterday, and it was very interesting for me to hear in these panels how institutions are also making a big effort to change their way of working and making an effort to work together so that they can better position themselves to help countries like ours in the G7+. Today, we are gathering here together to discuss the achievements, the opportunities, and the challenges to deliver change through the New Deal at the country level. We are also going to reiterate our high-level political commitment to deliver change through the New Deal and to support the G7+ key role and leadership in the process. Thirdly, we will want to discuss substantive views on how the post-2015 development agenda can best address the challenges related to conflict and fragility. These are the main objectives of the high-level discussion of this first segment. We will revert to more technical issues concerning governance, work program, and indicators in the senior official part of the meeting from 4:30 to 6 p.m. this afternoon. We hope that at the end of these discussions, we can agree on a communiqué with our main conclusions. So once again, welcome to our third international dialogue, and I will hand over now to my co-chair to do the rest of the session, please.
Mr. Christian Friis Bach of Denmark. I'm pleased to announce that the co-chairs have both agreed to serve for another year as our co-chairs.
Thank you very much. I feel honored and privileged to continue as a co-chair working with Pires, who's energizing this important global agenda with her personal commitment and her own experiences. Well, half a year ago, I think when many of us met in New York discussing these issues as well, I told the story of a former ambassador who'd been in Afghanistan. And he'd been out in a village, and there he had asked the villagers, what have you gotten out of all this international engagement in Afghanistan? And they've said, we got the school from Danita probably, we got the health clinic, well, I'm sure it was from the US, we got a well from perhaps the UN. And then he had asked them, what did you get from your own government? And they had said, well, nothing, that's actually too bad. This is a story of 5-6 years back. And since then, we have worked so hard to make sure that we, in Afghanistan, strengthen the state to deliver concrete services to the people. And I have to tell this story because in November, when I was in Afghanistan again, I went up in the north and met with a village community. And the first thing the village community head he stood up and he said he would like to thank the government of Afghanistan for the services that they had provided. And the difference between these two stories tells what the New Deal is all about. It's about enabling a social contract between the state and its people, building peace and prosperity at the same time. Now, we are having an excellent panel in front of us. Minister Ngozi is slightly delayed. She will come and deliver her keynote address as soon as possible. But until then, I think we should perhaps introduce our panel and start off the deliberations because we have a lot of things to cover. A lot of work has to be done. The discussions today hopefully can build political momentum for our common agenda, inspire us from actions on the ground, inspire us from progress done in each and every country where we work together on this crucial agenda. We have many interventions. I have been entrusted now to try to chair the first panels. And let me say from the outset that each and every speaker only has 2-3 minutes to present their interventions. And yesterday when we discussed how to do this and how to try to keep people on track, I asked if I could get some kind of an hammer or instrument that I could use, and they have provided me with this now. It says something like this. So when your time is out, you will hear small music. I will play. I'll play a composition of Bach, I think, and you'll know your time is out, and we are approaching the end of your strict time limit. I hope you will be with us on this, and I'll try to do it with a smile and the sound. But please, because we have a lot of ground to cover. Now, let me say that our first speaker now is an excellent champion of the New Deal. It is Dr. Mastor from Afghanistan, who have become a key partner and a close friend of the New Deal and of this dialogue, and he has consistently and stubbornly engaged in trying to build this important agenda. He has also, and his government with the Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework, as we heard it from Mr. Shah, built a solid basis for implementing the New Deal in Afghanistan. He's co-chairing with Australia the working group on the New Deal implementation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Mastor, the Deputy Minister of Finance from Afghanistan. You're most welcome.
A very good afternoon to all of you, and let me begin with congratulations again to the two co-chairs for the new term. And I'm sure that this term will be as successful as the previous one. And without the two of you, I don't think that we could have achieved that much that we achieved today. As a member of G7+, it is also humbling to see the level of progress we have collectively made. The development agenda is now a top priority for our development partners. The New Deal has been a great leap forward in trying to ensure that the trend for the fragile states becoming failed states is reversed. Afghanistan has come a long way since the Paris Declaration, Accra, and Busan. We have developed our national development strategy, and based on which, in the Tokyo conference in 2012, we have presented the 22 national priority programs, which, if you translate it as the New Deal, it is the one plan, one vision, one plan. At least 20 of that 22 programs are agreed or endorsed by the partners. At the same time, before Tokyo conference, we have agreed with all development partners that let's develop the local chapter of the New Deal. And it was not possible to implement the New Deal document unless we have modified it according to the local realities. And thus, we have developed the aid management policy. We had very interesting times when we have negotiated that document with the partners. However, nothing was against the New Deal document, but what was agreed by the HQs and the high-level officials when agreeing with the New Deal, the local or the field staff had problems with the same thing when agreeing in the field. But luckily, after a long process of negotiations, the document which was jointly agreed was developed. And now we think that we have a local chapter of the New Deal, and we are implementing it the same way as New Deal requires. In the same, and we took the opportunity of having the New Deal to reflect the new aid management policy and all the criteria of the focus and trust, as well as the peace building and statement goals are reflected there. Now, at the same time, in Tokyo conference, we agreed with the Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework, which is a more focus on the mutual accountability, something which before the Tokyo conference was just as a name, mutual accountability, but always it was one side. Everybody wanted the government to be accountable. But now we have this agreed document, and both sides are very firm in terms of making or keeping the other side accountable. And the good thing is that we will have in July this year, we will have a senior official meeting to see how each side did its best in terms of the deliverables that they agreed earlier. So, as I said, aid management policy is one thing that all criteria are reflected there, and we agreed with the partners that at least 50% of their aid to be channeled through the government system. They use the finance and procurement system of the government, and they reduce the parallel structures, and 80% of their funds to be aligned. And we are based on the matrices that we developed, we are measuring each other's performance. In the meantime, we somehow addressed the issue of several technical assistance programs, top-ups, and everything through the two agreed programs of the civilian technical assistance programs and capacity building reforms. And I think that we are completely in line with the New Deal document. When I'm talking about we, it's not only the government, it is with the international partners as well. And I hope that we also could contribute to other countries, G7+ countries, programs, and also to learn from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mastor, for these important points. The aid management policy, the Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework are milestones in the New Deal implementation in a very fragile country still. But well done, and keep us accountable. I think that's a very important point that you made. Thank you for this good start. We'll now turn to another champion of international development. I think the senior, not in age, but in how long time you've been a development minister. Ms. Gunilla Carlsson, the Minister of Development Cooperation from Sweden, is really a champion of international development and now also of implementing the New Deal in Liberia together with the US, and we look forward to hearing your experiences. You want to join us up here? Okay, good. Yes, it's fine. Please, Gunilla.
Thank you, Christian. Yes, I'm getting old, but I have also to congratulate the couple for your reappointment, or well, whatever it is. Not only that you are good friends, but also that I know you as very practical and reformist people, and I think that's exactly what we need for you to be good champions for us all and bringing us together. So thank you for that. May I just say a few words as Minister of Development Cooperation to say why I really, really love the New Deal concept, because it was said before from Rai that this is not business as usual. We have to work differently. And I think we have to be very, very clear that this is a fundament that will help us to drive economics and thereby have development. It is a foundation that we are working upon to have sound politics, and that moves absolutely beyond official development assistance, but where experiences from ODA can be helped and also can be used catalytically. But we have to organize ourselves differently, and that's what we are working upon, to see that we have, if we would like to have results, really to honor the country ownership and responsibility in order to make this right. And that's, to me, what New Deal is about. The G7 Plus has been very, very helpful to see that first, to recognize the challenges. This is not easy, but also to see that we need a comprehensive approach that has, as a starting point, I would say, to have inclusive politics, to make this also sustainable, and that is as important as state revenues, security sector reform, justice reforms, and so on and so forth. We are privileged from Sweden to work together with United States with a pilot of Liberia. I visited the country several times the last year, and I can really see what it makes. When you have this open budget initiative where you have much more of transparency about the public finances in order to gain trust, but also what Mr. Kone had elaborated upon in a beautiful piece of paper called Agenda for Transformation. I can really see that this is transforming Liberia, but it's also highly recommended and building trust not only for the UN mission there or for us as donors or the neighboring countries, but I dare to say also among the public that we meet with when frequently coming there. And of course, this is still a lot of challenges, but I think we are doing it right to putting all the good things at the table at once. So I think also this doesn't only goes with words. It goes also, of course, with indicators, that we have a good political system, that we have a very diverse representation of people, and also that the public confidence building starts at once. That's why I'm also happy to just, if I may, Christian, mention also Somalia, where we have seen how Somalia is really using the New Deal as a matter of how to do the development. And I'm really, really encouraged about this vision. So I would just conclude with this, as I also have Emilia Pires here, to say that these lessons learned, and that we also now have the methodology, gives me a great expectations, as I'm also part of the post-2000 panel that was set up in order to also specifically look in situations of fragility. And I think we here together are developing tools in order to see that we can, if we mobilize and unleash the potential of human capacity within countries in fragility and conflict, if we do that correctly and build institutions to encourage that, we can secure peace, bring stability, and thereby development. So thank you so much for your leadership.
how it has to work together. And thank you also for bringing up the high-level panel and the importance of injecting the ideas that we have towards in this room and in this agenda and in the New Deal, injecting that into the high-level panel and hopefully into the post-2015 development agenda. Peace, security, inclusive states, justice, all the principles here, I hope, and we hope, can inform the work of the panel and of the post-2015 development agenda. Thank you very much, Gunilla, for this brilliant statement on your commitment to the New Deal. Let me now turn to our keynote statement. And we are really honored to have Her Excellency Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala with us, the Coordinating Minister for Economy and Minister of Finance from Nigeria. I hear you referred to as the super minister, and that is exactly how we see you and hear you, and we are very pleased and honored to have you here to give a keynote statement on behalf of your experiences in Nigeria, but also especially as co-chair of the global partnership with which the New Deal should be closely aligned and coordinated. So please take the floor, Minister.
And I want to apologize for coming late, just running from one meeting to the other. I thought I was just making a few remarks through the sheer force of will of Emilia when we were in Indonesia. But I'm happy to share the few thoughts I have with you and to say how delighted I am to be here. And Christian, I don't know about super minister, beware of such terms, especially in a developing country. But I'm really pleased to be part of this forum and also to share with Gunilla. All of us serve with Emilia on the UN high-level panel, as well as my being co-chair with Justine Greening and Mrs. Alice Bajana of Indonesia of the Post-Busan Development Partnership for Development Cooperation. What I really want to do is to use the next few minutes to share some thoughts on the implications of the post-2015 development framework. And I'm sure Gunilla has already shared some. I'm weaving in the main points from the vantage point of a developing country that I think we should be focusing on, that are relevant to the issue of fragile states, and also building on my own experience in my country. I want to make 3 points. One is on domestic resource mobilization, and you wouldn't be surprised at that from a finance point of view. The other is on building institutions, and the third one is on knowledge sharing. On domestic resource mobilization, we know that an estimated 1/3 of ODA is spent in fragile and conflict-affected contexts. Yet, as Emilia has often pointed out to us, these countries are the furthest away from achieving the MDGs. In fact, no fragile state is on track to achieve the MDGs, although plenty of effort, commendable effort is made, and we see some amazing things that are happening on the ground, given the context in which all of you are dealing in. And there I want to compliment and commend you. It's very tough work, and also commend the partners who support the work in the fragile countries. Given the anticipated reduction in future ODA inflows, I think it would be very important to invest in domestic resource mobilization in developing countries in general, but particularly even in fragile states. And interestingly, some of the research from the OECD shows that investing ODA in strong tax systems in developing countries can yield very good returns. Because we have to think of the sustainability of the work that is being done. It's estimated that $1 of ODA spent on building tax administration capacity results in another $350 in increased tax revenues. This is important for us to reflect on as we move forward on sustainability of effort in these countries. And it's important in this regard to find that very little ODA is allocated to building strong tax administration systems in developing countries, including in fragile and post-conflict settings. But there are some good examples of how aid has supported reconstruction of tax institutions in post-conflict states that we can build on. We know that in Mozambique, following the end of the civil war in 1992, a broad set of tax reforms was implemented, and this resulted in an increase of tax revenues from 8.5% of GDP in 1992 to about 15% of GDP in 2011, which is about the average for the continent, and a very good effort on the part of Mozambique. Similarly, Liberia has also embarked on widespread reforms aimed at improving customs administration, raising corporate taxes, reforming tariff policies, and overall strengthening of its tax administration procedures. I would argue that policymakers in fragile and post-conflict states need to take ownership of this need to improve domestic resource mobilization, and in particular, encourage their development partners to prioritize investments to support tax institutions and tax administration. That way, the vulnerability to shortages in aid assistance and aid flows will begin to be eliminated, and will also give a sense of increasing pride and ownership to the people in the country for their own development investments. My second point is on building institutions, which we all know are central to long-run development. Improving governance and building institutions, we all know, occurs over a long time frame, typically about 20 to 40 years. And so it would require very patient development and husbanding in the case of fragile and post-conflict states. I've been making the comment that some of the very important actions that we find are needed to stem and fight corruption, which is often talked about in these states, do not have to do with the very visible actions, but have to do with the unsexy, quote unquote, work of putting in systems, processes, and institutions that can stem leakages and separate people from transactional behavior. So I think that we need to focus attention on the long time period it requires to be able to build these institutions. And this is for partners. And then ask ourselves, how do we build the patience to be in it for the long haul? The current set of MDGs were very silent on goals concerning good governance and institution building. However, in the current UN high-level panel, post-2015 discussions, we recognize the importance of good governance and enabling institutions as a building block for sustainable prosperity. I often use my own country as an example in this question on institutions. And people talk about corruption and leakages. And finally, you buckle down. What we're trying to do is quietly and silently build institutions and the systems needed in our financial institutions and in others in order to tackle this problem. In the Ministry of Finance, we are putting in place 3 systems, 3 electronic platforms at the same time in order to help with this issue of accountability, better governance, more transparency, and stemming leakages. An integrated personnel and payroll management system with biometrics that allows us to pay our staff straight instead of the previous methodology we had of just sending money to different departments, which allowed for interference and a lot of leakages. A government integrated financial management system that creates an electronic platform that allows all the ministries, departments, and agencies, Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank, to be able to talk to each other and transfer payments electronically, again, minimizing the human element. And the third is a Treasury single account system that allows an overview of resources within a financial system. So just as an example of how these kinds of things, they take time to do, but are vital, and I think we should look at them very carefully in fragile and post-conflict conditions. The post-2015 agenda should recognize and support the development of fair, effective, and accountable institutions and good governance more broadly. And in the post-2015 framework, there are a number of suggestions emerging. There are specific suggestions, such as ensuring that all persons have a legal identity, for example, by leveraging the use of biometric technology in ways such as the one I mentioned, to improve accountability and tackle corruption. There are also suggestions for public institutions to provide detailed accounting annually in order to promote further transparency and accountability. I believe all these suggestions are vital, not just for fragile and post-conflict states, but also for all developing countries, and we need to patiently work on them. The last point I want to make is on knowledge sharing among fragile states. And I think a forum such as this provides an excellent opportunity to foster knowledge exchange. We need to consider building templates or establishing an archive of some form which can facilitate knowledge exchange among the various countries that have signed up for the New Deal, learning one from the other, as well as including learning from other developing countries, and of course from the North. As an example, we know that South Sudan benefited significantly from lessons from Sierra Leone's assessments in the structuring of its first fragility assessment. Interestingly, many fragile states are also endowed with abundant natural resources, and this is a point which we've talked about and in which knowledge sharing is very important. This presents tremendous challenges for governance. However, a point I've made in the past is that many resource-dependent countries have very weak capacities in negotiating fiscal arrangements with mining companies and other firms that help with the exploitation of natural resources. Here, there is a great deal of knowledge that we can share, developing country to developing country, emerging markets to fragile countries, and fragile and conflict-affected countries among themselves. We know that there are wide information asymmetries in the capacities of developing country government officials compared with the teams of lawyers and engineers that often come to structure these deals. And I think one of the first conversations I had with the finance minister from Timor-Leste was on what was the experience of Nigeria in trying to handle some of the oil companies and these deals. And we began to talk about our experiences and how whether there was anything in it that Timor-Leste could benefit from. I want to strongly encourage this. Some of us have been through it before, and we can help without reinventing the wheel. And the ideas that one could have on in fact, developing international best practice template that maybe all of us can tap into, which could be shared by policy makers in resource-abundant developing countries. I believe senior officials in many conflict and fragile states will find such a scheme to be very helpful if we could think of templates that can be developed to actually help and this is also part of the domestic resource management efficiency and mobilization. So much is lost when poor agreements are negotiated out of lack of knowledge. And there's a great deal of transfer pricing and other practices that takes these resources away. And I think there are studies emerging now to say that monies removed in such practices are more than equivalent to the amount of aid that goes to developing countries. So just stemming these practices and sharing knowledge is a very important thing, which I think this forum ought to look into. So let me conclude then by just thanking you and commending the effort here, saying it's an excellent one. And I think there are very useful ways in which this forum can take some ideas of benefit to the countries forward. I want to thank you for having me and wish you very fruitful deliberations.
And accountable institutions and knowledge sharing, especially in the management of natural resources. I think all three issues are crucial for the international dialogue, for the New Deal, and for the G7 plus countries. So thank you for those excellent and strong points, bringing us further in our deliberations. Now we will continue the panel discussions, and I'm pleased to turn the floor now to His Excellency Mr. Amara Kone, who was already introduced by Gunilla as, again, a champion and a very strong intellectual capacity for the international dialogue and the New Deal. Your country have done a lot. Your president gave an inspiring speech on these issues at our September meeting, and you are really taking the lead. So please, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. Hello to everyone. We're happy to be here. This has become a tradition for us. On the margins of these meetings, we meet as fragile states to talk about some of the challenges we're facing. Today, I don't have a prepared speech. I would like to just give an update on the progress we are making in Liberia, because Liberia is a pilot country. Quickly, I would like to say that the framework we are working with is important. We need now, I think the framework has been established. We need now to move beyond the framework, to getting things done. I think this is the key here with this piloting. For Liberia, it is important for us to focus on the results versus the process itself. So quickly, I will give a couple of updates. We are focusing first on building trust with our citizens. And I think Gunilla here, alluded to some of it that she saw in Liberia. Our guest speaker, the Honorable Ngozi, mentioned some of it. I just want to say that we would like to build trust among our citizens and also with our development partners, because this is a new platform for managing aid effectively. And so in Liberia, we are implementing a couple of reforms, a lot of reforms on public financial management, on the management of our natural resource revenues, to the extent that there is a moratorium now on our forestry sector, to ensure that we get, the regulations, the laws, and the institutions right, so that we can, get the benefits that are coming, that should be coming from the revenues in the forestry sector. The other thing that is new to Liberia, which we must get right, is the revenues coming from, oil, and so there is a debate now in the country about changing our, oil laws that gave the regulatory and, the operational powers to one entity, that was established, say, 15 years ago. So we need to look at these laws to ensure that the future rents from, oil revenues can be used wisely for the people. The other thing that we are also working on in this New Deal process here has to do with reforming our revenue systems, customs, tax administration, and also focusing on the institution as well. So we are moving away from having the revenue administration inside the Ministry of Finance and creating an authority to manage this, as is done in most countries, with the establishment of the Liberia Revenue Authority. We also are focusing on our state-owned enterprises. These are public corporations that should be giving dividends, to the people through the budget, which has not happened for many years. So we are now holding, our SOEs accountable for financial reporting, and during the budget process, we include their statement in the budget to be able to negotiate what kinds of contributions they can make, to social programs. The other thing that we've concluded recently is what our guest speaker talked about, getting the Ministry of Finance, the Auditing Commission, and the Central Bank to talk through one system. So these are some of the things that we're working on. Finally, on the issue of the One Vision, One Plan, we have our vision, we have our plan. We've completed our fragility assessment. We need to get that to validation, and a cabinet task force is being organized by the president to oversee this New Deal implementation. So we're making progress. We just need to move a bit more faster to results. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these very concrete, hands-on experiences and concrete steps you've taken in managing revenue again from natural resources. It's crucial. And I'm not sure it's an encouragement, but I can tell you we are still struggling with this in Denmark also with our oil revenues. But very good to hear your lead and your dedication to those issues and the enterprises and the fragility assessment. Liberia has done a lot. And Liberia has done a lot with the assistance of, Sweden, we heard, and the US. And now I'm pleased to hand over to Ms. Nancy Lindberg, who is the Deputy Administrator from US Aid. And you have been with us throughout this journey and have been taking the lead in promoting the agenda in the US, in the world, and in your pilot countries. Thank you very much for hosting us and for taking the lead also in bringing us here and bringing us together. Nancy, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. And let me echo Administrator Shaw's words of welcome and also congratulations that the two of you are maintaining your leadership. That's really important, I think, for the initiative. And let me just say a few words to build on what we've already heard about the joint pilot that the U.S., Sweden, and Liberia have, because it's really a great privilege for us to be able to have this partnership. And I would like to highlight just a couple of areas where, in the spirit of a progress report, I think that there was very encouraging progress, considering it was only a year ago that we announced this partnership, and a lot has happened in that year. But we are particularly focused on two of the goals, and the first is the rebuilding social fabric, and really want to commend Liberia for the formation of the Liberian Governance Commission, which is holding monthly roundtables, which were launched by President Sirleaf in Bong County, that really addresses the need to rebuild that fabric after many years of conflict, and doing so by focusing on some of the painful issues of the past and also looking at the center periphery issues that are so common to countries that have experienced a lot of conflict. So it takes courage, it takes commitment, and we just commend Liberia for tackling that issue. And I know you mentioned that last year as one of your priorities, and you've really moved forward with it. And we're pleased to be able to support that. The second is the goal number 5 on revenues and services, and we've already talked about this. We've worked with our Liberian partners to look at a couple of ways to support what is both a need to address the importance of decentralization, also recognizing that it's often the counties and the districts that have the least capacity. And in the instance of Liberia, there's transportation challenges once you start going outside of the city, and there's less capacity, but yet a greater need to deliver services at that local level, to build trust, and to be able to get those essential services out. So we've worked with the Minister of Health and Social Welfare with a system to use Minister Kone's phrase from last year to use the pipes and identify where there are leaks so that you can fix them together. Through a system called Fixed Amount Reimbursement Agreement, where we're able to enable the health minister to run the program, to do the procurement and delivering of medical supplies in a way that minimizes the possibility of leakage and manages the risk both on the side of the Liberian government and of USAID. We've talked about the electronic billboard, which Dr. Shaw mentioned earlier, which is fantastic. And we've supported Liberia in a number of programs that are helping that kind of revenue management getting information out. I want to mention two challenges. One is to truly build ownership and have this be locally driven, especially to include civil society, which is so important, will take time, as has already been mentioned. And so even as we drive and focus on those results, I think we do have to remember the long time frame. Finally, a number of us are also involved with the resilience agenda, and we'll be meeting later today on resilience, and so many of the countries that are coming out of conflict also have protracted and constant cycles of natural disasters. I think a challenge ahead is how do we take a resilience approach and marry that with the New Deal, which we will be looking very carefully at how to do that, especially in Somalia going forward as another place where we're partnering. Thank you.
Great.
I just beat the gong.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I like your wording of creating the social fabric and fixing the pipelines of delivery, and then bridging to resilience. Important points. Thank you very much for that strong statement. Now, let me hand over to a country at an earlier stage in the New Deal implementation, South Sudan, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Kosti Maniba Ngai, good friend of the dialogue, and have the ambition now to finalize a compact in 2013. You were a kind host when we had the international dialogue meetings.
Large extent.
Morning, he reminded us that there are 986 days left till the end of the MDGs, and whether or not people can enumerate all the MDGs, the point is that as a target, they shone a global spotlight on the steps towards development in 2015. I think now, amid all the talk about defining the new framework post-2015, is a chance to seize the momentum, to use the state and peace-building goals to shine a global spotlight on the steps needed to overcome fragility. And I want to commend Minister Perez and the G7+ for all they've done to create that voice and that platform. It's really up to us now, I think, to use the international dialogue to make sure that the challenges are reflected in the post-2015 framework. Secondly, maintaining the momentum, I think, is very important at the country level. And we've heard about the pilots of the New Deal that are underway, the country-led fragility assessments, and I think what's important is how we maintain that momentum and how we coordinate that momentum on the ground. So at the bank, we're thinking of ways to incorporate the outcomes of the country-led fragility assessments, compacts, and the indicators, which are so important, into the World Bank Group's own strategic development process. So for an example is the recent World Bank Group partnership strategy in Timor-Leste was informed by the country-led fragility assessment that was undertaken last summer, and that needs to be the pattern. But that leads me to my third point, which is the missing link, and I think that's data. We can't shine a spotlight on the issues of fragile and conflict-affected countries without the data to back us up. The high-level panel of eminent persons on the post-2015 development agenda in Bali called for a data revolution. We agree. We think it's absolutely urgent. We think too often we're navigating development in the dark. We know especially it's not an easy task for fragile states to gather statistics. We want to work to help to scale up our work through the South-South Knowledge Exchange for representatives from G7+ statistical offices. We're also supporting further development indicators for South Sudan and Somalia as part of New Deal implementation. Fourthly, perhaps a big issue that we haven't talked about yet is putting our own houses in order to be able to support this agenda, by which I mean putting some of the donor houses in order to be able to support the agenda. At the World Bank, I think we've clearly recognized the need for fundamental reform in the way we do business in fragile states. That means looking at our processes, looking at how we allocate funds, making sure we have the right people to the right place at the right time, and making sure, as I say, our own country strategies are led and informed by the fragility assessments. Thank you very much.
Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Mr. Kaifala Mara from Sierra Leone, many years of experience in the public sector dealing with economic governance, and I really look forward to hear your experience using the New Deal to inform your national plan and your compact in Sierra Leone. So please, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me on this panel. I am new kid on the block. This is the first meeting I'm attending, but I want to say thank you for having me. Sierra Leone will continue to build on the foundation laid by my predecessor. We went through the fragility assessment, we learned lessons. Key among them was that we need to consolidate peace and security. We took that seriously. We had elections, and it was free and fair. We've reached a point where UNIPSIL is now scaling down. And hopefully soon, we'll have a regular UNDP country office. Having learned the lessons, we've decided to enshrine many of those elements in the new prosperity agenda. That is our new poverty reduction strategy paper that will take us 2013 to 17. Gender happens to be one, and we have identified it as one of the key pillars under the 8 pillars that we'll use to drive the agenda for prosperity. Governance also being one. We are also thinking of reviewing our constitution to take on board many of the issues or challenges we have learned over the years. But what have we done in terms of our relationship with partners, which we all know is central to this initiative? We have agreed with them that we'll soon agree a new mutual accountability framework. But I have decided to take it beyond that, and I have said we need a portal. We need a portal to monitor what you do and what we do, so we'll be accountable mutually. And that has been accepted. During the spring meetings, during the course of my interactions with our colleagues at the World Bank, I said that some of our IDA 16 projects have been stalling. We are responsible for some of the delays, and you too are responsible for some of the delays. Key among them is, for example, the procurement processes, which we applaud the World Bank that they are now in the process of reviewing those. The key question is, how will we take it forward? We are a country in a hurry. We want a special portal to be established between the government of Sierra Leone and the World Bank so that we'll be able mutually to monitor the project that we are rolling out. And when I go back, I will do a formal note, as we have already had initial understandings around those. My God, I'm under pressure. Now, in addition to the portal, we want to strengthen revenue mobilization. We are looking forward to, and this is a South-South cooperation, this is a forum that we'll wish to tap into. We want to strengthen minerals taxation. We want to link our human resources with that of our natural resources. You may have one expert, for example, that may go into one part of the country. He or she may be paid 300,000–400,000 K, or a small company. But a whole community living there may be receiving or benefiting less. How will we link our human resources to natural resources? I've run out of time. But just before I close, and please bear with me. Now, post-2015 is critical. How will we take it forward is important. Many of the elements that we'll be able to identify here may be enshrined there. But question, is it possible to identify some of the key elements, some of those benchmarks or goals that we may set for us as a G7+ here internally? I think that will be useful So there'll be 2 tiers of goal. We'll try to enshrine one in the MDGs or post-15 MDGs, and secondly, we'll set some for ourselves. And that is what will strengthen South-South cooperation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I've run out of time. I do hope that I'll find another platform to be able to share some of this with you. Thank you and good afternoon.
Country that have inspired us now by moving forward, has seen positive development. Security has now come to major parts of Somalia. There's hope for peace, there's hope for prosperity, and it's very exciting that the Somali government has expressed an interest now in really engaging in the New Deal. So the Minister of Finance and Planning, Mr. Mohamud Hassan Sulaiman, please, the floor is yours.
It's important to dialogue, global meeting to advantage global agenda on peace building and state building. Somalia's participation in the international dialogue and G7+ is vital, as we have begun using the New Deal as a framework to redefine the relationship with international partners and allied country priorities with international engagement. As a member of G7+, a transition state, we are in the early stage of the New Deal. In brief, I would like to share with you some milestones and important steps that we have taken to advance the New Deal implementation in Somalia. As you know, Somalia has been the forefront in the advocacy of change in the aid architecture and international engagement in fragile states. Although the current administration, which I am part of, is less than 6 months old, our journey to support the global movement in shaping aid policy and started long before we emerged out of the transition. Somali leaders participated in many international forums that include Monrovia, Delhi, and 4th High-Level Forum Aid, effective in Boston, among others. We have made considerable contribution to the work of G7 states. At the country level, there are a number of peace-building and state-building initiatives and country-wide dialogues being undertaken to move us out of the fragility to a stable and prosperity stage. First, our government is committed to revenue flow with accountability and transparency. With the support of donors and development partners, we are considerably making a steady progress in the public finance management and putting in place the proper systems and processes necessary to ensure prudent and efficient revenue management and improving service delivery. Consistent with the President Hassan Mahmoud's call for justice system reform, we have begun the dialogue process and held several consultation workshops to address the overall security and justice system gaps, as well as began the wider spectrum of judicial reform and rule of law. Our goal is to strengthen international engagement with the focus on building of bilateral and multilateral relations based on mutual trust and accountability is our government's key priority. Without further ado, my government has, since elected 6 months ago, have shown firm commitment to the New Deal, both globally and locally. We have principally agreed to pilot the New Deal implementation in Somalia. We have completed the formation of high-level task force comprised of local international partners that will spearhead the country process of New Deal implementation. We are in the final stages of putting in place a dedicated New Deal unit under the leadership of the Minister of Finance and Planning, which will support and coordinate the New Deal implementation at the country level. Going forward, we are planning to use the New Deal framework to hold the national dialogue, improve aid mechanism and accountability using trust, and developing a compact that reflects our priorities and commitment of donors and development partners. Thank you for your attention and opportunity to share with you country progress on the New Deal implementation.
Government and for the brave step now to really engage in the New Deal and strengthening your systems, your management, your accountability structures as described. This is a dialogue we look forward to continue even tomorrow when we will have a roundtable, and on the 7th of May when we will gather together on the Somalia conference in the UK, and that brings me to the next speaker, Ms. Justine Greening, the UK Secretary of International Development, not alone a New Deal lead partner together with us and our Dutch friends in Afghanistan and South Sudan, but also co-chairing the global partnership and thereby also bridging between aid effectiveness and Busan and the New Deal agenda. So Justine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As I hope everybody knows here, the UK strongly supports the New Deal for engagement in fragile and conflict-affected states. We've always seen it as a really critical foundation for seeing the delivery of the MDGs in these situations. And so, as you've just said, Minister, we're playing our role in trying to implement that on the ground. We very much welcome the government of Somalia's decision to implement the New Deal, which we think is excellent news, and we're absolutely ready to support its lead. It's clear that Somalia is now emerging from years, decades of conflict with a new government that is really committed to making things better for its people. And as the international community gets behind this, I think the New Deal can really provide this ideal framework to make sure that the Somalis are in charge of their own development, but supported by the international community. As you said, I'm looking forward to hosting an aid coordination meeting with the Somalia government and with the EU on the 7th of May, and hopefully that will pave the way towards signing a compact at an EU-hosted conference in September. And I very much welcome the personal engagement that Emilia Pires has had in supporting Somalia to take the New Deal approach, visiting Mogadishu to talk directly to the President and the Minister of Finance. And I think this demonstration of support between G7 plus countries is really an example of the kind of leadership that the New Deal is all about. As you said, the UK is the lead donor for Afghanistan and South Sudan New Deal implementation. And despite decades of instability and conflict, I think real progress really is now being made in Afghanistan. And the UK will support Afghanistan for the long term with over £170 million of support every year up to 2017. But I think we recognise that it's vital that aid and development is effective and has the impact that we all intend. And I think that's where the New Deal can really help Afghanistan. We've been leading efforts with others to implement the New Deal there, and a compact known as the Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework, I think many people around this room will be familiar with it, has been agreed with the UK, with the Afghan government and the international community. And I think it's very important to say that this sets out the mutual commitments. And clearly, from a donor perspective, it's important that we see development spend to drive progress and results, not to simply sustain the status quo. And I think we've been very clear in the UK that we know that we need to work with our own partners to agree the Afghan government's aid management policy, and that's incredibly important. We already, as a government, align 80% of our assistance with the Afghan government's own priorities, which I think is a really important aspect of the New Deal work. And we route around 50% of our aid through the Afghan government systems. And so we very much welcome the Afghan government's commitment on the New Deal to date. And obviously it's incredibly important that the Afghan government itself meets its own reform commitments by holding credible elections, tackling corruption and protecting women's rights. These are really key parts of the Tokyo framework, and they also link to peace-building and state-building goals of the New Deal, so they're mutually reinforcing. I'd just briefly like to turn to South Sudan and really congratulate the government of South Sudan. We heard earlier from His Excellency Manibi Ngai on the leadership that it's shown, and really welcome this sense that the New Deal Compact can now be signed and that there's been some real progress in recent days on that. People mentioned transparency. That's incredibly important. At the G8, the UK will champion not only trade and tax, but also transparency, and I think we recognise that we need to get our own house in order. We hope that as part of the global partnership, that we can host a ministerial conference towards the end of this year where we can look at how we can work together as development stakeholders more effectively. And I think I will leave my comments there, Chair, and allow others to have their contribution. Thank you.
True leadership in all the 3 country cases and in international development efforts as well, and even in times of economic crisis in Europe, you are increasing your development contribution to the world. It is really showing world leadership. Thank you very much for these important points. Now, we know macroeconomic stability and political stability comes together, and no one is better placed to speak about that as the Deputy Managing Director from the International Monetary Fund, Mr. Min Soo. We are really pleased to have you here. The IMF is a crucial part of a New Deal. We can hear around the table here how financial management and revenue management and taxation and a number of crucial issues that IMF really has key expertise in are crucial for New Deal implementation. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ministers Pierce and Barr, and first of all, the Managing Director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, has asked me to thank you for inviting her to participate in today's events. He was very much regrets that being unable to be here in person, but and asked me to represent the fund to join this on his behalf. The fund attaches great importance to help countries in fragile situations and achieve sustainable development in an environment of peace and security. It is therefore an honor and a great pleasure to join this conference to discuss how we can support fragile and conflict-affected countries. We in the fund are keenly aware of the difficulties in achieving macroeconomic stability and economic development under fragile conditions. Most vulnerable countries have limited financial resources and only weak capacity for economic policy formulation and implementation. The fund has long recognized the importance of tailoring engagements to the specific needs and capacities of the fragile states. A first review of the fund's engagements with the fragile states and the post-conflict countries was discussed by our executive boards in early 2008. While this review was generally positive about the fund work, some lessons were evident. Accordingly, our board underlined the need for an approach in fragile situations that was graduate, flexible, and based on the medium-term perspectives. In mid-2011, our executive board took a second look in the issues of fragility in light of the more recent experience at the time and the evolving thinkings in the international community. As many of you well know, the 2011 review of the challenges of countries in fragile situations is published with the early 2008 reports on the fund website. So you're welcome to look at the documents, which is our method and stand. To make the funding of 2011 review operational, a guidance note to draw on key lessons from the review was issued to fund staffs in May 2012. So we just start 2008 and had the middle review in 2011, then we have operational notes last year. So the fund is really moving into these areas, not only on policy area, but also in operation as well. I'm encouraged by the common thread between the lessons that we have drawn from our works in fragile situations and approaches and incorporated in the New Deal's frameworks launched 2 years ago in Busan. We see a lot of similarities. Our experience underline the need for all partners working with fragile and conflict-affected countries to look carefully at their engagement strategies. Given this, it is very reassuring to see that states represented by the G7+ under the able leadership of Minister Pearce, have taken such an active role in setting the agendas, including through the New Deal framework. While fund staff does not have the authority to formally endorse external initiatives like the New Deal, we are fully supportive for these goals and welcome the framework that is provided for international community's efforts. Let me conclude here by noting my personal commitments to ensure that the fund continue in its efforts to support fragile and conflict-affected states. The current forum is an excellent opportunity to share views with other partners, and I'm very much looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Because I think it's immensely important that you have that you follow up the focus and let it be a country-led program. That is why we in Somalia now intend to build up a special financial facility in the transition period until the international community comes in, because we think it is so important that you are the ones that are in the lead, and being like wrecked with the civil war that's been for so long, it is very difficult to mobilize the money in order to actually get the priorities for the government through, and you in a way have to ask the others to back up your government, but the best way is to have the money on your own, and that's why we putting in the money and invite others, and we go to the London conference in May. We invite others to join us in that special financial facility. Second, and I'll bring up in East Timor, because I think that, or Timor-Leste, and I think it's so important that we show that we have, what can you say, that we have the long-term commitment, and that is really needed to follow up the New Deal. And I spoke with the minister responsible for oil and the oil program, which Pires would know very well, and he said something that I think is so important that we all note down. And he said, look, we said it was important that you were there when we needed you, and that was a long-term commitment. And we say, we walk together on building up our oil sector. And instead of just bringing out all kinds of consultant and giving all the capacity building that we're talking about all the time, we really need to be there when you need us and walk at the pace that you need us to walk at. And that was said by the minister. That was something that we had done and succeeded in doing. And that, I think, is the commitment that all of us have to make to the countries when we are working under the New Deal. Long-term commitment, walk at the pace that is needed. Last is trust. And here is a dilemma. And here is an opportunity. Because there's no question, there is a question of accountability, and there is a dilemma here. Because giving more trust, right, and balancing that out with the kind of accountability that we need to have to the people, to our constituencies, in order to make certain that you have the accountability and transparency in place, is definitely there and needs to continuously be debated. But I think that what was put forth as an important issue, namely the need for you to build up, what can you say, a social contract with your people, and getting the social contract right, getting the accountability in place, and is something that we could share. Because your accountability to your people is just the same a kind of accountability that we need to our people in our home, and focusing down on transparency and focusing on giving the openness that also different finance ministers, amongst others from Liberia, said is important. May I say 2 seconds on tax at the final, because I'll just back up Ngozi. I'll just back up Ngozi in saying that, look, if you have an investment that $1 could give you $350 back, well, that kind of investment you really have to be stupid not to do, right? And there is no private company who wouldn't take that kind of investment, and doing that kind of investment is really important. And I'll draw your attention to the IDB's book about more than revenue, taxation as a development tool, because it really says that building the social contract, taxation is a key tool. Thank you very much, and good luck.
offer a lot to the world. Thank you very much. Civil society has played a crucial role in the dialogue, continuously been there, engaged, inspired us, and also helped in implementing the New Deal. So I'm pleased to turn the floor to Mr. Hafez Wani, the National NGO Focal Point for South Sudan, and from the NGO Forum. So please, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. That's the kind of impact that it's had on civil society from my country, South Sudan, where civil society has been spread out all over various priorities. It's the level of strengthening it's had to civil society engagement along the consolidated objectives that it has demonstrated has been immense, and also its relationship with the government has greatly enhanced the space within which civil society can actually communicate and engage with the government along these set of goals and objectives. And that is something that is very beautiful to witness from a country that like South Sudan. Also, the relationship between North and South civil society has been impeccable and has helped in enhancing the collaborative nature of engagement and maintaining the pace of engaging with this particular process. These are very good issues to be a part of, and also the indicator process has been inclusive, which is something that wouldn't have happened 3 or 4 years ago. And these are particular issues that I would like to highlight as great achievements in South Sudan, particularly. The changes that I would like to see as civil society, both North and South, currently supported by civil society platform on peace building and state building, quite particular. One of the best roles for civil society is monitoring the New Deal, and civil society has a key role in gathering data and also in the indicator process. Perception indicators is very important, and would like to ensure that this is not left out, and it's a demonstration of the views of the common citizens in the country. Also, a strengthened partnership that allows for information to circulate and inclusive evaluation processes to take place, and enhancing on the gender aspect of it. I'm sorry, I'll just rush over to the final bits of it. The compact element of it is also very essential, and maintaining the inclusive nature and support of civil society in the entire process. We have 3 particular actions that we'd like to emphasize as steps towards influencing change from now until to bring change into the process. One of it is, while the whole civil society approach has been of concern, we ask you to ensure the government-wide approach to New Deal process, which is critical to all steps that all parties are involved in. And the second one is civil society would like to be a partner with the government in validating and testing the indicators in the G7 countries. And the third touches on the issue of resilience. Civil society is prepared to use its close links with the society at large to ensure resilience and ability of fragile states to absorb and recover from shocks is adequately met by meaningful and mutual transparent partnerships, which is particularly in brief what we'd like to articulate at this point. Thank you.
There's a need for your role in keeping us accountable and in keeping the New Deal or ensuring the New Deal being implemented. So thank you for your participation. Now I'll turn to Mr. Klaus Rüdighauser from the EU Commission, and the EU is a strong part of this engagement internationally, and have new instruments now for state-building contracts even. So perhaps you should tell us a bit more about those and the EU engagement. Please, Klaus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, for this very kind introduction. Commissioner Piebalgs has asked me to present his apologies. He attaches very much importance to this process. He would have liked to be here, and so he has asked me to say a few words about quite specifically what we are doing at the EC level, and you have already mentioned that. The first one is we have actually translated some of the lessons learned into our general policy. We have presented a policy document which proposes that in the future we will much more differentiate between different types of countries, and that obviously applies very much to fragile countries. Now, the next step is we are now embarking in the programming in 130 countries around the world. And our special nature as a donor brings it with it that we are present in all fragile states, not only the New Deal countries, but all fragile states. And we will, in the programming for the next 7 years, implement the principles of the New Deal in our programming. So we will directly translate that when it comes to the principles of engagement, but also the specific activities that we propose to undertake. At the same time, we are developing at this moment a framework for results monitoring, and we will include in this framework for results monitoring also the specific indicators that apply in fragile states and that have been developed through the New Deal. Now, we are obviously committed to, in the fragile countries, to really establish institutions and to provide them with the means to deliver basic services and to support poverty reduction. And that's, Minister, what you mentioned. We have pioneered in the area of budget support in fragile states, and we have drawn the lessons from this experience and translated into what we now call the state building contract, which is an instrument very specifically targeted at these situations. Then I would just like to mention that we are very actively involved now already in the New Deal implementation in the Central African Republic. We are a new partner now for Somalia, and we very much hope that we will be able to build together a New Deal compact by the time of the Brussels conference in mid-September. And lately we have also pledged that we will become a partner for the New Deal in Timor-Leste. Now, one more point which I would like to make. We obviously believe very much that peace and security issues need to be addressed in the New Deal countries, but also in the wider context. And I think that we should draw the lessons that we have learned, and also make sure that in a post-2015 framework, these lessons are implemented, because peace and security, not only in fragile states, but particularly there, are of great relevance. So we think that this process should also already think about how to send a certain number of messages and requests when we start finalizing a post-2015 framework. So all this just to show that we are very strong supporters of the process, but we would also like to commend the commitment from the G7+ countries, which is extremely strong and which helps us to move forward rather quickly.
Thank you very much for this strong commitment, and I do believe the state-building contracts are unique in support of the New Deal principles, and we really acknowledge the EU for taking the lead here. This concludes the panels where we learned from experience, where we looked at pilots, where we shared our knowledge and plans and prospects from the pilot countries. I think it was extremely rewarding. I thank you all for the concrete examples you brought to the table, for the concrete steps that has been agreed upon around in the pilots. I think this really shows the uniqueness of the dialogue, sharing together, discussing together, having a dialogue on how can we build peace and states at the same time. So thank you very much. We will now have a more forward-looking panel, and I'll hand over to my co-chair, Emilia. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me see. Thank you very much. Now, this next panel is going to discuss the shaping of the global development agenda. In particular, we want to see how the New Deal, or rather the principles of the underpinning the peace building and state building goals, can actually shape our post-2015 development agenda that addresses conflict and fragility. So I would like to invite the panelists to reflect on two main questions. How can the New Deal and the principles underpinning the state building and peace building goals help shape the post-2015 development agenda? And what political action is required to ensure conflict and fragility are considered as universal goals and that we can collectively deliver against them? Again, I'm going to remind everybody that you only have about 3 to 4 minutes for your intervention, and my co-chair is going to play the music once the time is up. So I would like to call upon Minister Armand Bori, Regional Minister for Planning from the Democratic Republic of Congo, to take the floor. Armand, please.
Well, thank you, Emilia. I wasn't really prepared to have a small speech here, but I think it's a great opportunity for me, as I was out of politics for more than a year, and coming back here is like coming back. I mean, I'm back on track, and I think that the National Dialogue and the G7 Plus, I have participated in that exercise since 2008, and I think it's a great pleasure for me to be here again and to give my perspective regarding the questions that have been raised for this panel on how the New Deal and the objectives of consolidation and reinforcement of state can help in reshuffling the agenda post-development 2015. I will speak in French so that I can really speak with my heart. Dans cet exercice, il aurait fallu rappeler la genèse du G7 ainsi que du dialogue international. Dans le temps, et ça jusqu'aux années 2008, jusqu'à ce temps-là, les partenaires décidaient seuls sans vraiment nous consulter. Par la suite, avec l'avènement du groupe informel des États fragiles, et ça c'est en 2008, lorsque nous étions invités à Paris pour la préparation de la réunion d'Accra, à ce moment-là, nous étions enfin entendus, mais toujours sur des matières proposées et présentées par les donateurs. Ensuite, avec la formalisation progressive du G7, cela a conduit finalement à former cette plateforme de dialogue et d'échange en 2010, qui était le premier dialogue international organisé à Dili. À ce moment-là, les donateurs et ensemble, nous avons adopté le nouveau deal une année après, en 2011. Et cela à l'initiative du G7. C'est dire que l'initiative, depuis 2008, a changé en termes d'établissement des grandes politiques de développement. L'initiative aujourd'hui est dans les mains du G7 et c'est ainsi que nous avons eu à présenter ensemble notre point de vue commun par rapport à l'atteinte des objectifs du millénaire du développement. Nous avions dit qu'au sein des États fragiles, il nous était quasi impossible d'atteindre ces objectifs-là si 5 conditions préalables qui constituent en fait les 5 objectifs du New Deal, si ces 5 objectifs-là, si nous n'avions pas des résultats probants dans cette matière. Nous avons donc eu d'une manière ou d'une autre à refaçonner la manière dont les donateurs doivent intervenir dans nos États fragiles. Il me semble donc évident aujourd'hui, plus qu'évident, que l'agenda du développement post-2015 devra tenir compte des objectifs de consolidation de la paix et de renforcement de l'État, faute de quoi nos efforts mutuels, car il s'agit ici d'efforts mutuels entre les États fragiles et les donateurs, nos efforts mutuels auront été vains, et cela, au niveau des États fragiles, nous le refusons. Car nous considérons au niveau des États fragiles que nos 5 objectifs relèvent de valeurs universelles. Quand on regarde ces 5 objectifs, légitimité politique, Est-ce que cela ne touche-t-il pas les valeurs démocratiques participatives? C'est une valeur universelle. Sécurité, l'accès, la sécurité pour tous, c'est aussi une valeur universelle. La justice, l'accès à la justice pour tous, c'est aussi une valeur universelle. Les fondements économiques, le droit au travail, d'avoir une dignité, c'est aussi une valeur universelle. Revenus et services, la bonne gouvernance, c'est aussi une valeur universelle. Puisqu'on me presse de conclure, je vais conclure. Considérant que tout cela, ce sont des valeurs universelles, nous devrions donc rechercher dans toutes les déclarations universelles de par le monde ces 5 valeurs qui nous sont chères, ces 5 valeurs qui nous soudent au niveau des États fragiles et en faire la plus grande publicité. Je voudrais aussi dire que le New Deal n'est pas un produit d'un tel groupement du monde. On associe très souvent le New Deal à l'OCDE. Non, on ne doit l'associer à personne. C'est une initiative qui est partie du groupe des États des 7. Et je pense qu'on va me taper le marteau sur la tête. Il faut le dire. En fait, il s'agit de valeurs universelles qui s'appliquent à tous les citoyens du monde, qu'on se le dise, avec une particularité particulière dans les États fragiles. Je vous remercie.
OECD, please take the floor.
Thank you, Emilia, and let me start on a somewhat personal note. I was for many years involved in the peace process in Sri Lanka. After the tsunami in Sri Lanka in 2004, in the next 2 months after the tsunami, 50 heads of state and foreign minister came to Sri Lanka. All of them came with their own aid programs, their own projects, their own civil society organizations, and most important, of course, they came with their own TV crews to portray this back home to their people there. What they did not bring was any deep understanding of the peace process in Sri Lanka, where Tamil militants were fighting the government. And at the end of the day, the international effort in Sri Lanka after the tsunami had a negative impact on the peace process. That was not the intention for sure, but that was the objective result of that. This is what the New Deal is exactly about, to avoid this. And I think we have made a quantum leap forward, for sure. A lot has been achieved under your leadership. But the most is still remaining. We must do a lot more, and I think the key issue, as in nearly everything else, is leadership, political leadership and political will. And here we must mobilize the double political leadership. The leadership of the fragile nation, the leaders of that nation must set clear objectives, which can be understood by their people, but also by the international community. At the same time, the international partners must accept that leadership and work with that nation under the leadership of that nation. And I think we must do much more of this. There is a Chinese saying, proverb saying that the mountains are high and the emperor is far away. And I think that applies a lot to this context still. The decisions made around table like this have a very long way to be implemented on the ground by the development partners and of the government. So we need this double leadership, and it must be much stronger, must be sustained over time, otherwise it will not work. What I can offer on behalf of the OECD and the Development Committee is that we will try to find leaders on our side. Some of them are obvious already. We will work with the fragile states. We will encourage people to sustain that leadership over a long period of time, and we will use the Development Committee as a vehicle to bring the other donors into the same pattern, but it depends again on the leadership of the state and the leadership of the partners. Finally, one area where there is a very obvious contribution from the Development Committee and from the OECD, and that's what Ngozi brought so forcefully forward, and that's on domestic resource mobilization and taxation. Here there are lots of initiatives. The French have launched Tax Inspectors Without Borders. The Norwegians have oil for development. The Australians have minerals for development. And the OECD has taxation for development. All this must be brought more together, and it must be be scaled up to in a much, much bigger dimension than there is at the moment. But to conclude, it's all about the political leadership and political will, and we must mobilize that both from the fragile state and from the international community.
Thank you very much, Eric. I think you're very right on this. And I think today, this afternoon, has shown the presence of many ministers from both the G7 plus countries and the developed countries is a good signal for us. Because for the last 3 years, we've been working very hard. And I think taking on from what Armand was saying, one big issue that G7 plus was talking about was that we were not able to even get to achieve the MDGs because there was something missing. And lots of discussions led to the peace building and state building goals. And I think we have maybe 3 years to prove whether that really works. And so with this political commitment from the leadership, let's hope that we can prove it, because that's the only way we can influence the next global agenda. Otherwise, why should they listen to us if whatever we're doing doesn't work? So this is why it's so important for the New Deal to work, and it can only work if we actually implement it. And I think what we heard from around the table before was already a good sign, and let's just keep up the momentum. Now I would like to call upon Minister Hippolyte Taremai. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name properly. Minister of National Unity, Reconciliation and Peace for Solomon Islands, please.
Thank you, Chair. Solomon Islands is not well known to the whole world, but only well known to the Pacific countries. And I hope many of you here don't know where is Solomon Islands. Well, Solomon Islands, what are the things that so far the achievement that the country has go through? One is about the law and order. Now we are in the transition of the intervention. I know that some of you know that, we have invited Ramsey to come to our country, and now we are in the transition, and this shows that the law and order or peace is slowly coming back to the country as before the tension that we have gone through. Now, Solomon Islands, through his own policies, we are slowly discovering, or we are slowly improving our MDGs, and hopefully through the policies of the government, we will, by 2015, we will achieve more of the MDGs. One of the main thing that the problem that we find out is about the climate change, and I hope that all of us who attend the meeting early this year, the Prime Minister of Kiribati has talked more about that, the climate change. What do the G7 Plus do to the islands, or the islands or the countries that face sea level, the sea rise level? And for us in Solomon Islands, we already experienced 2 tsunamis. I hope maybe other countries you do not experience that, but for us in Solomon Islands, we have experienced 2 tsunamis, and we lost many lives during that 2 tsunamis. One has just happened this year, just last month ago, that it happened in one of our provinces in the Solomon Islands. And the government is looking forward and have a budget just to start with relocating the people who stay along the coast near the seaside. Even those who stay in outer islands, the government is looking forward and have a budget just to relocate people from this one of the MDT that we have to address. The other thing is about peace, which is my ministry is looking after and is continue to working on it, and we are now improving in peace, making reconciliation between two parties or between people who have involved in the tension during from 1998 to 2003, and so far we slowly improving in peace, and now I believe that if you come to Solomon Islands, you will see how we improve from the just after the tension. Now peace slowly is coming back to the country as before. And lastly, may I take this chance just to thank the leaders of the G7+ for including Solomon Islands as one of the countries which involved in the tension who has experienced. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'm very pleased to welcome Ms. Helen Clark, the Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme. I call upon you to have the floor now, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and I thought perhaps I could just usefully comment on the consultation for the post-2015 agenda, which has been running on the connections between conflict, violence and development and the way they impact on development. And I think the fact that there's been a lot of traction around this discussion owes a lot to the work done by the International Dialogue, the G7+ and the New Deal in pushing up the issues of conflict and fragility as very important ones in development. In the discussion in Helsinki just in very recent weeks, the participants were very keen to emphasize they see this as a universal issue, not just a problem of fragile and conflict-affected states. There are global issues which contribute to fragility for trafficking in arms and drugs and illegal trafficking of natural resources, money laundering. There are other actors far beyond fragile states. So the participants were very keen to remind us all of that. They also spoke a lot about the complex relationships, interrelationships between conflict, violence and disaster risk and how they overlap and are impacted on by social polarization, pressure on natural resources, environmental degradation, profound inequalities in the societies, weak institutions and poor governance. So, of course, people involved in these consultations have been very keen to see goals set for post-2015, which do embrace addressing the multi-dimensions of risks to development these days. We do, of course, have many different ideas for what should be goals and targets in the post-2015 agenda, but certainly a way has to be found to get the very important objectives of building peace, justice and security into the agenda. In the end, we hand over the body of all these consultations and feedback to member states who are working on sustainable development goals and will eventually move to a negotiation. But I think what needs to come out of these networks is continued advocacy for support for the countries most affected by the conflict, disaster, violence, nexus of issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You're very right on this. So we just have to carry on and continue our work and advocating very hard. And that's what I also do in the panel. I would like to call upon now on Mr. Dan Smith, the Secretary General of International Alert of United Kingdom.
Thank you very much. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak at this gathering. I think it is well established and widely agreed that the agenda for international cooperation on development is increasingly going to focus on to the kind of issues that we've been discussing today and are covered by the New Deal, and onto the countries of the New Deal and others like them, other fragile states. And if it is true that the agenda, the actual sort of the work plan for international cooperation is going to be focusing on that, then the articulated framework for post-2015 international development should reflect that. And that, I think, is the most important single advocacy statement to make. I completely agree with you, Helen, that this is an advocacy issue. Yeah. And the change goal which is needed, it seems to me, is to shift the conflict and fragility issues out of the niche in which they now sit, where they are the preoccupation of conflict and governance advisors, and onto the main stage of development. There are well understood reasons why the international agenda will move in this direction, and we've been talking about them today. All of these reasons, all of these factors, institutional deficiencies and so on, will be both worsened by and will make it harder to handle the big problems which almost all countries are going to be facing in the next 10 to 15 years. Natural resources, where demand is growing, but so are costs growing as well. Water insecurity and food insecurity, the unfolding social consequences of climate change. And while the New Deal doesn't specifically address all of those issues, it offers a way to handle them. Through the PSGs, through the other things that we've been talking about today, the role of analysis and strategy and so on. So what we see here in the New Deal are the key questions of the post-2015 agenda. This is not a sub-paragraph. This is not a chapter, the last in the line. These are the defining issues of whether we will really be able to say in 2030 that we moved forward in the 15 years from 2015. You will know the expression, I'm sure, of walking the walk and talking the talk, right? Well, it is important now to talk the talk better. The debate doesn't stop. In fact, it almost just starts when the high-level panel comes out. And so the call from my side would be to make sure that the engagement in the advocacy continues in the period from the UNGA in September this year through until the post-2015 framework is being signed and sealed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call upon Minister Pascal Canfin, the Minister Delegate in charge of development for the Foreign Affairs France. Please.
Thank you. You will allow me to speak French to introduce a bit of biodiversity as well in this meeting. Je voulais tout d'abord nous amener à nous interroger en permanence sur la notion même d'État fragile. Je rappelle que le Mali, dont je n'ai pas besoin, je pense, de présenter la situation, n'était pas considéré comme un État fragile et qu'il était même considéré comme un État modèle de la part de la communauté des bailleurs. On sait ce qu'il est advenu et donc je pense que nous devons en permanence nous interroger sur ce que nous considérons comme un état de fragilité ou des facteurs de fragilité. Deuxième message porte sur l'importance que nous accordons en tant que Français, et bien d'autres pays le font aussi autour de cette table, à ne pas sacrifier l'aide dans les États fragiles. Et nous savons que la tendance existe. Nous savons qu'il est plus facile de dire on se concentre sur les États où ça fonctionne mieux, parce que les résultats obtenus sont plus rapides, parce que ça permet de mieux vendre ces résultats. Et nous sommes en permanence attachés, y compris dans les débats internes à la Banque mondiale, puisque nous sommes aujourd'hui dans cet événement, à rappeler l'importance de l'aide sur les États fragiles. Et je crois que nous partageons ce message. Nous l'avons évoqué avec le président Kim, qui en a parfaitement conscience. Et donc, continuons à mener ensemble ce combat pour que jamais les États fragiles, même si c'est toujours plus compliqué d'y opérer, ne soient oubliés. Le troisième message porte sur la taxation. Le collègue de l'OCDE l'a évoqué. Nous avons pris avec la Norvège notamment une initiative sur inspecteur des impôts sans frontières dans le cadre de l'OCDE, mais au-delà, je pense que nous devons travailler, notamment dans le cadre de l'agenda post-2015, davantage sur les conditions du développement. Il y a deux piliers à notre action. Il y a l'aide publique et il y a les conditions du développement. Et parmi les conditions du développement, il y a la capacité des États à collecter des impôts. Et cette exigence-là, cet enjeu-là est d'autant plus fort dans les États fragiles qui ont par définition des difficultés à collecter l'impôt partout sur leur territoire auprès de l'ensemble des opérateurs économiques. Et c'est aussi pourquoi j'attire votre attention sur le fait que l'Union européenne a adopté il y a quelques jours une nouvelle directive sur la transparence en matière d'investissement des grandes entreprises européennes dans le secteur extractif. Or, l'exploitation des ressources naturelles est proportionnellement une activité économique beaucoup plus importante dans les États fragiles que dans la moyenne. Ça veut dire que l'économie de ces États repose sur des conditions équitables d'exploitation des ressources naturelles. C'est pourquoi il nous semble que cette directive adoptée dans l'Union européenne et qui va imposer davantage de transparence à la fois pour lutter contre la corruption et lutter contre l'évasion fiscale est fondamentale. Elle va s'appliquer à l'ensemble des entreprises européennes agissant partout dans le monde. Elle reprend le standard que les États-Unis avaient adopté il y a quelques années et qu'ils vont mettre en place à partir de l'année prochaine, le fameux Dodd-Frank Act. Et j'invite, puisqu'il y a des représentants de ces pays autour de la table, j'invite le Canada, j'invite le Japon, j'invite l'Australie à nous rejoindre dans le G8 ou dans le G20 pour avancer sur cette transparence des investissements. Dernier point, ça concerne l'agenda post-2015 également et les objectifs du développement durable. On pourrait imaginer que les objectifs du développement durable sont un luxe et que s'il y a bien des États qui peuvent y échapper, en quelque sorte, ce sont les États fragiles, qui doivent rester concentrés sur les objectifs du millénaire et l'éradication de la pauvreté. On peut penser aussi le contraire, c'est-à-dire que pour précisément parvenir à l'éradication de la pauvreté, dans les États fragiles, il faut élargir la notion même d'insécurité ou de fragilité à des enjeux qui sont aujourd'hui des enjeux environnementaux. Évidemment, chacun a en tête le changement climatique, cela a été rappelé par mon voisin. Au Sahel, par exemple, pour ne prendre que cet exemple, il pleut 30% de moins qu'il y a 10 ans, et donc sur des écosystèmes déjà très fragiles, évidemment, l'impact du changement climatique est dramatique. Et donc, voilà les quelques messages que je voulais faire passer et qui font le lien entre l'agenda post-2015 et la situation des États fragiles.
End of the panelists. I still have about 4 people to intervene from the floor. However, I will hand over to my co-chair to briefly speak on the Washington communique before I call upon the other 4, okay?
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very rich discussion and dialogue from all panelists. Now, we have tried to prepare a Washington communique on peace building and state building. And it has now been distributed. It emphasizes the importance of the New Deal. It emphasizes that a lot of good progress has been made, results have been achieved around in the pilot countries, and I think that's exactly what we've heard. It urges us to go forward in an even stronger commitment to focus, to trust, and to the implementation at the country level, building stronger partnerships also with civil society, enhancing the inclusion of the private sector in the new deal. It emphasizes the importance of bringing this agenda to the post-2015 development framework, and it recognizes and really welcomes the interim list of indicators that the group has been producing, which is a tremendously important step and result that we will welcome at this meeting. And then we really continue and promise that we will continue to promote the dialogue as a unique platform for sharing and learning and for making a change in how we work together. This is the Washington communiqué. It is not for discussion. I hope you will. Go with us on that. But it is hopefully for adoption here formally at the international dialogue as the result that we have. You have it on your tables. We will have the last 4 speakers, and then we will formally, hopefully, adopt this communiqué. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Minister of Chad, would you like to make an intervention? Chad. Yes. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais tout d'abord, au nom du gouvernement du Tchad, vous féliciter de cette initiative qui nous a permis de discuter, de toucher l'essentiel, au fait, des renforcements des capacités dans la bonne gouvernance, la justice, l'éducation, la santé, par rapport, conformément aux objectifs du New Deal. Bon, avant de vous citer quelques mots, je voudrais aussi vous féliciter pour cette confiance renouvelée à votre égard et à votre équipe. Donc, le Tchad, en fait, dans le cadre de New Deals, était membre depuis 2008 et a fait des réformes importantes. Nous avons un comité interne qui travaille en étroite collaboration avec le point focal. Et effectivement, dans le cadre de ce comité interne, nous avons pu en fait, valider le 15 avril passé le plan national de développement qui est aussi un document très bien fait avec des indicateurs qui ont des liens avec la pauvreté, avec la réduction de la pauvreté, avec la bonne gouvernance, avec la justice, en fait, en grosso modo, avec les objectifs du New Deal. Et en fait, les États fragiles, mon pays, le Tchad, vous le connaissez, est entouré par des pays qui sont en conflit actuellement. Et les réfugiés, je voudrais parler des réfugiés en provenance de la Libye, les réfugiés du Darfour, les réfugiés aussi de RCA très récemment. Donc cette fragilité, je crois que cette situation mérite, vous avez fait beaucoup, vous nous aidez beaucoup, mais ça mérite encore davantage de plus attirer votre attention pour que vous regardiez, comme le ministre français vient de le dire, un État fragile, c'est un État soudainement peut changer sa situation en conflit, en guerre, en sécheresse, en beaucoup de calamités. Voilà, donc dans ce sens, il y aurait en fait une campagne de sensibilisation du plan national de développement dans le cadre de mobilisation de ressources. Et le gap à financer, c'est un gap qui n'est pas assez important parce que tous les secteurs qui ont lien direct avec les objectifs du New Deal ont un financement de fonds propres de l'État tchadien. Donc le reste, je vous demande de votre implication aussi dans le reste des mobilisations de ressources qui sera fait autour d'une table ronde. Voilà, merci, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I now call upon Minister of Haiti, if you'd like to make an intervention. Oh, no, not there. Okay, fine. Germany, Ms. Bolhoff, are you there? I've got it on my list. Côte d'Ivoire, is it? Okay, then go ahead, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais vous remercier pour cette invitation à ce dialogue. Je voudrais simplement faire une remarque sur la coordination donc, du financement, donc de la fragilité dans les pays fragiles. En Côte d'Ivoire, il se trouve que le concept existe. La Côte d'Ivoire est fragile depuis 2008. Il y a donc des financements qui existent, l'intervention des bailleurs de fonds. Il se trouve que ce n'est pas suffisamment coordonné. Donc il faut mettre un accent particulier sur cela. Ceux qui ne connaissent pas le New Deal gèrent souvent des financements liés à la fragilité. Et là, il est important de recentrer et de faire en sorte que l'intervention donc de chaque bailleur de fonds qui se trouve être membre de INCAF depuis donc qu'on a décidé en juin 2011 au Libéria, il faudrait que cela passe un peu par les points focaux. Il faut qu'on sache un peu comment ils interviennent, sur quoi ils interviennent et dans quel secteur et si ça respecte les priorités du New Deal. Parce que nous voyons souvent la Banque africaine de développement qui finance donc certaines activités vraiment qui ne sont pas vraiment les priorités donc du New Deal. Il faut donc une coordination à ce niveau et il faudrait que la sensibilisation soit faite vraiment au niveau du G7+ et de l'OCDE. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now that the Minister of Haiti is back, I'll give you the floor.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Pour dire déjà, c'est une belle opportunité qui m'est offerte là de participer à cette table ronde. Ça me fait 3 jours depuis que j'ai été nommé ministre de l'économie et des finances. Et j'arrive là et je suis en apprentissage, je l'avoue. Mais le sujet est d'importance parce qu'il s'agit de parler de reconstruire l'État et de donner les moyens, en tout cas créer les moyens de la stabilité dans le pays. Et tout le monde sait que pour que ça se réalise, il faut créer des emplois, il faut améliorer les niveaux de vie des citoyens. Les modèles qui ont été mis en place depuis un bout de temps, moi je parle pour Haïti, les expériences de pays en tout cas, qui sont membres de ce groupe au moins, certaines ont été présentées ce matin et on voit qu'il y a beaucoup de similarités, mais il y a aussi des dissemblances. Haïti, c'est un pays d'opportunité. Pour qui connaît Haïti, on a des difficultés à s'expliquer pourquoi ce pays est pauvre. La principale raison de ça, c'est que Haïti a toujours été un pays de rente. L'économie n'a pas pu se développer parce que l'organisation de la société est ainsi faite que ça encourage les activités de petits groupes au détriment de la collectivité. Les facteurs de production ne sont pas forcément accessibles on va dire, à l'ensemble de la population. Et les petits producteurs n'ont pas forcément accès au marché. Et en tout cas, les produits se gaspillent dans des zones pendant qu'on a des besoins extraordinaires dans d'autres zones. Donc il y a des problèmes d'infrastructure, mais il y a d'abord le problème de l'organisation de l'État. Haïti, pendant au moins les 25 dernières années, a connu une situation assez paradoxale. Où la principale, le fonds de commerce, j'allais dire, mais en tout cas la principale manière d'aider la classe moyenne à subvenir à ses besoins, c'est à travers l'aide internationale et surtout à travers les transferts des Haïtiens vivant à l'étranger. Et 72% de ce qu'on consomme dans le pays aujourd'hui est importé. Et donc c'est difficile avec ça de créer des emplois et de trouver les conditions de la stabilité. Donc aujourd'hui, on a besoin que les partenaires internationaux écoutent les Haïtiens pour vraiment accompagner les projets qui sont de nature à transformer la société. Voilà.
with the way this initiative is going, and also that the new Dutch government has made fragile states again a priority, which shows in the new white paper, country visits, and of course the support we show with the UK and others on Afghanistan, South Sudan and other places. We're very pleased with the communique that you presented, and in addition to the peace and state building goals.
Dialogue and the fact that we know that a picture is worth 1,000 words. We invite all the participants at the table to join us in the front of the room for your class photo. As you leave, please clear the table after the photo because we'll need to reset the room slightly for the next session. And all those who are returning for the business meeting, the IDPS, please just take a few minutes and then return, and we'll get this next session underway. Thank you all very, very much.
Pressed for time. I hope to win the award for the shortest agenda item on our agenda this afternoon with everybody's cooperation. I think as some people are aware, the co-chairs charged 3 of us at the steering group meeting in Nairobi in June to work on and finalize the governance document just to ensure that we have a blueprint in place for the work moving ahead. So Mustafa Mastour and Peter van Sluis, representing the G7 Plus and civil society respectively, and I representing the INCAF, all went away from Nairobi. We conducted consultations with each of our caucuses. We worked closely with the International Dialogue Secretariat. Donato was very helpful in helping us through that. We made changes, proposed some ways of tinkering a little bit with the document until we were all happy. And now the document in front of us is a result of that consultation. I won't go through it because I think it's self-evident. The only thing I would say is we were really trying to find a balance between, on the one hand, formality and informality, predictability and adaptability, recognizing that while we need something in place, we also have to recognize that this is a young and a changing process. So with that in mind, we've suggested that after the probably September 2015 MDG review conference, that we maybe take an opportunity just to make sure that the governance document makes sense so that we're responding to events as they take place. So with that in mind, it may not be perfect, but I think it's close to perfect as we're going to get, and recognizing that we'll have a chance to play with it in a couple of years. I think on behalf of the 3 of us, we present it back to you, co-chairs, for adoption by the whole plenary. Thank you.
And I'm sure under the leadership in the next couple of years, well, 1 year so far, we'll be able to make an impact. And lastly, this is not necessarily an area of work, but the spirit of the dialogue is to be an open forum for discussion. So engaging with new partners, I think this morning we had a good example of private sector, is something that we need to continue to do, opening up to other countries that are interested in this work, that are interested in sharing their experiences. So we're going to look at, for instance, the international financial cooperation to help developing work in some of these areas, and we'd be very happy to have your inputs in the next few weeks and months on how to do it. I shall stop here. You have all the information in the document. Number 2, and I'll hand it back to the co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donata. I would like to open now the floor for comments on this document, on our work program for 2013-14. Anyone would like to make any comments, please? It's your chance now. Mette first, and then World Bank, Joel.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Now, the International Finance Corporation just wants to support very much the idea of engaging with new partners, and especially with the private sector. And I just want to say that we are very committed to help the international dialogue on this agenda. Also, we think as part of this South-South partnerships is an important angle where we can bring in some of the experiences from some of the BRICS countries and other emerging economies that can be really valuable. So we are committed to working on new partnerships.
Discussion were all very, very well done. I think very clear, very concise, and very effective. One thing I just would put on the table is that in preparation for this meeting, the annual meeting, I'm wondering if the monitoring that you're doing in the context of this work program can be brought together in kind of almost an annual report of some sort that would summarize where we are. I found, for example, in the package here, the country level descriptions of what's going on, extremely valuable country by country. But just when you have the ministerial level participation that we were just fortunate enough to have, if we can maybe have an advance of that, essentially maybe a state of the implementation of the New Deal in a kind of an annual report format, it would also help to ensure that the ministers and others, we can give them proper briefings and they can be following up on the implementation. So it's just one way to bring together some of the work that you're already planning.
Thank you very much, Joel. Anyone else who would like to add your voice to on this document? Okay, nobody? Okay, so please, go ahead.
No, perhaps let me just to Joel say, I think that sounds as a very good idea. And I also saw Secretariat nodding their hands, Donata. So should we put into the work program as an addition that we will prepare kind of an annual report a year from now, summarizing key results from countries that can put some attention to the agenda? Isn't that a good idea to have an annual report as part of a work program? I think that's a very constructive proposal, and that can draw the attention. And as Joel said it, I think the great thing about the dialogue was that we really had ministers here, a number of ministers, and if we can next year also provide them with a strong publication that can draw attention to the results that have been created, I think it's going to build the dialogue even further. Thank you.
Thank you. OECD?
Just to come in on that point, I think if we had an annual report that pulled together the results, what's been happening, that would actually be a document we could put to the ministers in the global partnership as well. And I think just picking up on the messages we heard earlier on today about how these processes are linked, so that evidence would go to the global partnership ministerial as well.
I would amend is just to put a short report. The last thing we want is the Secretariat spending months and months preparing for it. So if I can add an amendment to Joel's proposal to insert short summary report, maybe it's 10 pages, just so that we have something crunchy to focus on at the meeting.
I suspect the assumption we had when we were preparing is that that cuts across all the work, but we can actually add it because it's an important point. So every area of work we're going to work on, we will need to engage with other parts of your administrations or your organizations. So perhaps we can add that line to the work program. And it's not only the diplomatic, but it's also the security, for instance. So thank you for making that point.
Thank you.
And good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to say that I concur with the point that was raised with regard to the diplomatic front, in particular after the discussion this morning where it was raised about where we're going to take all this in the post-2015 discourse. And as you all know, in New York, that process has begun with the open working group on the SDGs. And from our part, we've been trying to feed in language into different troikas to reflect what was the outcome of the Dili meeting recently, the Dili consensus. But I just wanted to highlight that none of the G7 plus fragile states are actually a member of the open working group. So we need to rely on different partnerships and different working groups and use the dialogue partners to push our agenda through. And it's very important with the report of the high-level panel coming out to take a really strong position and to deliver that position in New York. And we need very strong narratives about conflict, fragility, peace and security, and how it should be reflected in the agenda. We need strong voices. So thank you very much.
It's good, and it definitely is a tribute to the good preparations that have been made in building this meeting. Now, we have now the session, the indicators, peace building and state building indicators, document 0.3 for discussion. And we have our dynamic New Deal indicator duo, Ms. Francesco Bomboco and Mr. Henk-Jan Brinkman, who will co-chair this working group on indicators, have done a tremendously good work and will now introduce it to us. Please.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate working under your leadership and Minister Pires very much. And without you, we wouldn't be able to be dynamic or even accomplish anything. So in 2000, the UN adopted a beautiful document, the Millennium Declaration. And it includes quite an important language on inclusive politics, on security, on peace building, in fact, justice, and to fight injustice and violence. Unfortunately, member states of the UN immediately thought it was too difficult and too political to do anything with that, and they only focused on the development goals. And the difficult word was left to you. And this is really, I think, quite a congratulation to the international dialogue that we got so far. Because this is not easy, and it hasn't been easy, and we will continue to work very hard to make it happen. And it's difficult because it's a joint progress, a joint process. It's not a think tank somewhere in New York or in Paris or in Tokyo or in South Africa that is doing it, or a fancy magazine that is coming up with a fancy index. But it is a process that is jointly done to develop the goals that the Millennium Development Goals left out. And it requires time. That's very much the case, and it requires compromise. But we also have to be aware of that perfection can be the enemy of the good. And we also need to be aware of that we can accomplish something. When the Millennium Development Goals were formulated, there's one goal on maternal mortality that we knew was very important and included in the goals. But we had no data, and we didn't even know how to measure it. And now we do have data, and we know how to measure it. And actually, the maternal mortality rates are declining all over the world. So I think that is the example that we need to follow. The communique is great because I think it gives us now the green light to go forward with a learning process, and that's all what we want. We want this interim list of indicators to start piloting at the country level, learn by along the way, have events that the G7 Plus among themselves can exchange experiences, and revise the list accordingly when needed. What is important, of course, is that we track progress, and it's tracking progress within countries. It's not to compare countries. We have to be very clear what these indicators are not for. They're not used to compare countries or to rank countries. They're not for conditionality. They are fundamentally to make sure that we have an idea of the progress that we are achieving in the countries. And that can then inform the policies and the planning, the compacts, and of course the fragility assessments. So that is an introductory remark, and I hand now over to my co-chairs to start a little bit more about the process.
Je vais parler en français parce que les Français sont un peu minoritaires dans ce groupe. Alors, le processus, quel est le processus qu'on a commencé? On a commencé d'abord par développer ce qu'on appelle la matrice de la fragilité, en anglais le Fragility Spectrum, qui a permis, et là c'était dans une réunion technique à Dili en janvier dernier, qui nous a permis d'identifier 5 étape de la fragilité en rapport avec les 5 objectifs de consolidation de la paix et du renforcement de l'État. Alors, c'est un processus qui s'est fait de janvier à février 2012 et qui a éventuellement évolué à ce qu'on appelle aujourd'hui une matrice de la fragilité, et ce qui a permis au mois de mars, avec les partenaires au développement et le groupe du G7+, de développer un cadre d'analyse pour cette matrice de la fragilité qui a pu définir quelles sont les dimensions de chaque objectif de consolidation de la paix et de renforcement de l'État. Alors, une fois que ça a été fait, ça a été adopté, c'est un processus qui nous a pris de mars en juin dernier. Nous avons, à partir du mois de juin 2012, commencé à piloter cet exercice au niveau de certains pays, de 5 pays pilotes. Cet exercice s'est fait en Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone a été le premier pays qui a fait une évaluation de sa fragilité. Ça a commencé au Timor oriental, ça s'est fait au Sud-Soudan, ça s'est fait en RDC et au Libéria pour l'instant. Et on a entendu tout à l'heure qu'il y avait de nouveaux pays qui étaient intéressés à le faire, tels que la Somalie. Alors, une fois qu'on a identifié quelles étaient les causes du conflit et quels étaient les indicateurs qui pouvaient mesurer les progrès à travers cette évaluation de la fragilité, nous avons pu faire une liste provisoire des indicateurs qui étaient pertinents pays par pays. C'est cette liste provisoire qui a été mise ensemble pour nous permettre maintenant d'identifier quelles étaient les communalités. Et nous avons eu une liste préliminaire à peu près d'une 60aine d'indicateurs communs dans tous les pays fragiles. Et à travers des ateliers techniques d'échange d'expériences, on a pu réduire cette liste-là à une liste de 34 indicateurs qui est annexé au rapport qu'on vous a donné. C'est ce qu'on appelle communément les indicateurs partagés, les indicateurs communs, qui, on espère, deviendront des indicateurs globaux qu'on pourrait éventuellement alimenter dans ce processus de réflexion de l'agenda post-2015. Alors, ce processus d'identification de la longue liste a commencé d'octobre en mars 2013 et aujourd'hui nous avons donc comme cette liste intermédiaire qui nous permettra maintenant d'aller dans les nouvelles étapes. Il était important de ralentir un peu le processus pour s'assurer que tout le monde, que ce soit les pays pilotes, que ce soit les autres pays du G7+, on était sur la même longueur d'onde dans ce qui concernait les indicateurs. Alors il y a eu tout un processus de discussion, de validation, d'appropriation de ces indicateurs qui viennent de se terminer aujourd'hui, je dois dire, avec l'adoption du communiqué final qui nous permet maintenant d'avancer dans le pilotage de ces indicateurs. Donc quelles sont les prochaines étapes? Après cette validation, la prochaine étape maintenant, il s'agit de valider ces indicateurs. Pour l'instant, ils n'ont été validés que dans 2 des 5 pays pilotes, le Sud-Soudan et le Timor oriental. Il s'agirait maintenant, après cette validation, de finaliser la liste, le menu des indicateurs de tous les pays fragiles et d'entériner au niveau politique la liste des 34 indicateurs partagés pour enfin développer un plan d'action qui va nous permettre d'assurer le pilotage de ces indicateurs au niveau national. Merci beaucoup.
The important work and the tremendous works on the development of these indicators, and we congratulate the co-chairs of the working group on this tremendous work. The position paper, which has been provided in the room documents, it represents the common understanding, the common purpose, and also some of the observations of the G7 plus member countries on the list of the 34 indicators which we have right now. Let me highlight a few points which are important to us. First of all, let me talk about the process that how we came and finalized the position paper. The list of the 34 indicators was for the first time presented at the second working group, the second G7 plus technical meeting, which was where we had maximum number of the G7 plus focal points and member countries. And there were extensive feedbacks and consultations and some remarks on these indicators. Based on the same, and also given the guidance of our chair, we had a small task force where the co-chair of the working group was also present, and we set up this task force to come up with a position paper, and this position paper is the outcome of that task force. And after that, we had extensive discussions, and we also had some specific comments on some of the indicators from some of our GSM Plus member countries. Now, according to the consultation for the GSM Plus, the purpose of the common indicators is very important. We have to understand that what should be the purpose of the common indicators and what is it from the perspective of the G7 Plus. Despite the fact that the 34 indicators represent the major challenges and the major obstacles which might be shared by some of the countries, but they are not describing the nature of those specific problems which are faced by the countries. And thus, having said that, the common indicators should not be meant for comparability, as Hengjan mentioned, and they should not be meant for conditionalities. Secondly, the common indicators should not be used to skew the resources from an area A to area B just to show a favorable or important progress on the area B, which might have some vested interest from some of the stakeholders. And having said that, and given this background and rationale, the way forward for the G7 Plus will be, first of all, we have to make sure, as mentioned by Hengjan, that it has to be a G7 Plus-led process. And thus, we, the G7 Plus, will have the third G7 Plus technical meeting somewhere near in May or in June, where we will discuss the common challenges, and we will, in fact, frankly discuss the common challenges that we face. Because one of the problems, I would say one of the difficulties during the process of development of these indicators, we, the G7 Plus, had a rare chance to sit and frankly discuss the challenges that we face in the countries. And that's why we need to sit together, and we need space and time to discuss these indicators further, and hence to come up with our lesson learned and also our experiences that we share with each other. And secondly, the development of these indicators at the global level, the work so far has been kind of technical in nature. And when we are going to take them to the country level, we need a political validation of this work and these indicators. Because in order for having a political buy-in, we do need a political validation from our political masters. And at the end, I would like to remind you all that we need to maintain the spirit of the dialogue, which is we say what we do. And hence we need to make sure that we don't lose the basic motive which brought us to this forum. And that was the country context and country-specific context that has to be respected. And I would also like to conclude by saying that the New Deal is a toolbox, and the PSG and the PSG indicators is one of the tools of this toolbox. And we cannot isolate each of them from each other. And at the end, I would stop with the slogan that nothing about us without us. Thank you.
From civil society perspective, we want just to reiterate a few points which were earlier made, I think, during the high-level meeting or the global level meeting just before. First of all, I want to compliment the co-chairs of the working group for the excellent work done. I think it's a very solid document which is now here on the table. But there are a few comments I would like to make in terms of process and how to proceed further. I think in embarking on the use of indicators to measure how we are doing in implementing the New Deal, I think it's important to see it as a learning process for all countries which are signatories to the New Deal, and especially all the pilot countries. It's also important, I think, that we look at what kind of indicators we have on the table and whether we can have a balanced approach in terms of the use of objective, subjective and results-based indicators. I think it's important to also include the ideas of the people in the societies which we are aiming our interventions at. I mean, to include them also and to measure whether perception-based indicators can have a use, I think, in seeing whether the New Deal is in fact making it real deal at the local level. Civil society has been involved and would like to extend again its willingness and its readiness to be involved in further testing together with the G7 plus governments, but also with the working group in validating and testing the use of the indicators. We have also produced a statement which is in the back of the room. I think some of you have already seen it, which elaborates a little bit on where we see the indicators of use in actually measuring what we're doing. So.
Thank you very much for that constructive approach.
Provided by the co-chairs and all that are there. Sorry, let me move this forward. Okay, thank you. We welcome the work that's done and the content and would agree with what was said previously about not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And we would like to collectively find a way that we can move forward as quickly as possible on these. We understand the concerns that have been brought to the table and thank the G7 Plus for the really useful position paper and really agree with the need for piloting and adaptation to the country context. We think this is a really good idea and should be done. And we'd want to ensure that in combining common and country-specific indicators, the common indicators are not lost. We encourage the G7 countries to try and keep this exercise as simple as possible and work to incorporate the indicators into the ongoing data collection exercises that are already there. It will be important to disaggregate the indicators so that they can be as helpful as possible. But we thank everybody for their engagement on what's a really, really important agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. First of all, I must also thank the Chair for the Indicators Committee for the work that they have done in undertaking these indicators and send over to us G7 plus member countries for our inputs. They are inclusive and contextual as far as peace building and state building from Somaliland's point of view that was sent to us, which is greatly acknowledged for these indicators. I think it's just a comment to put forward, not so much of an additional task. I know producing indicators is a huge task, I think, but I think they would report to actual happenings that are taking place as far as this PSG are concerned on a country level. Perhaps it's another thought of thinking our monitoring process or aspect around these PSGs sort of crucial for us to reflect practical realities as far as the 5 PSGs are concerned. When you talk about security, for example, you know, they are fundamental on ground. That is sort of first point perhaps to look a bit because, you know, G7 plus countries, they have national processes in terms of monitoring. Indicators are more or less, one way or the other, have reflections into ours on these 5 PSG indicators. That's number one. Number two, you tend to find that, for example, the experience in Solomon Islands, peace building, state building goes to do with security. There are national processes that on top of it as well, reporting on the reality of the security on ground. Those are added benefit and bonus as far as PSG indicators on our context is concerned. So in other words, progression did actually take place because I guess very much that the rationale here is how well that would inform post-2015 development agenda. And that would be a catchy bonus on our part as far as G7 plus countries are concerned. So those are the only comments that I would like to raise for that. In other words, the indicators are more or less overarching, which is good because the moment we ran through this, when it was sent to us, they tend to capture more than half of what was happening as far as those indicators under those 5 PSGs. But I guess very much that the issue of monitoring, would we come up with a new method of monitoring, you know, whilst countries are having monitoring processes already in their countries, which is, you know, these PSGs indicators do capture as well. So perhaps that's a thought to put across so that countries will report exactly and utilizing those processes. I think those are the other comments that I sort of like to contribute here, Co-Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think that's a very important comment in the piloting testing, you know, that we bridge the local realities and the local experiences and the local work with these indicative list of indicators that has been developed. That's exactly how we would like to be informed when we move forward. So thank you very much, Judith from the United Nations Peace Building.
I have two minds about this indicator work. On the one hand, I think it's really wonderful that we've come to where we've come to now with the 34 indicators well fleshed out, well described. Because we could talk about generalities forever, and that would lead us nowhere. So I think that the group is to be commended for actually pinning down the most germane indicators for these kinds of settings. Then, of course, I understand that later on the targeting work will be done at the national level, but the whole idea is to get the general agreement on these broad broad goals that we want to be achieved. As I said, I have two minds about it. The other mind says then that I hope we don't get too caught up with indicators as an end in itself. That that we become too mechanistic and we're all obsessed about further refining the indicator, further refining targets, so that we detract from the real essence of it, which you put here in the document, behavioral change. We detract ourselves from leading the processes on the ground that would actually reduce violent crime, that will actually have more inclusive, for instance, women's participation. I mean, who is actually doing that activity to make it happen? So I just hope that we don't swing too far on this side of being sort of too rigorous and scientific in a way, and then detract from doing the hard work, which is making it actually happen, making the desirable happen. I think it's already so good that you had so many ministers here, because maybe even 6 months to a year ago, the criticism was that a lot of ministers had no clue of what they had signed on to in Busan. So I think the fact that you brought them here is really good, and they're all talking the talk, hopefully walking the walk back home as well. But obviously that's the first step. I think more has to be done to get more buy-in from the cabinet, and not just the cabinet, but civil society, the media, academia, etc., in country. Because I'm always trying to imagine the end game. Once we've agreed on these goals and agreed on the targets and how we're going to measure how country X is doing, I don't know. Is it going to be highly publicized, or is it going to be something, relatively close? I have no idea actually how this whole thing will be disseminated and shared at the national level. But if you don't get people behind you, like the media, like academia, like civil society, and of course MPs and ministers and all that, then it could go really awry when one or two things don't appear too good or too positive for a country. So anyway, I'm just maybe being a bit too conservative, but I just would like us to think a little bit more in terms of the whole area of behavioral change, what we're actually doing to make it happen, to make these goals realized, and then how we are aligning everybody behind it. So should there be some things that are not so positive, that is well understood nationally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The behavioral change is very much to be reflected also in the trust and focus indicators that we are going to discuss in the next session also. But I think there's been a general agreement here that we need to have indicators for peace building, state building, and that is in order to be able to assess whether what we do is actually having an impact on the ground. As said, to monitor some progress, to see whether we can really improve safety and security and participation and the state building elements. And I think that is very important. But definitely we shouldn't drown in the discussions. It has to have a real impact on the ground. But now I'll give the floor to Emilia, with a comment, and Chad first. So,
qui a essayé de nous faire participer à travers les réunions, ou bien par le web, on a beaucoup échangé, on a travaillé. Donc là, c'est une version quand même améliorée. Comme il a été dit au niveau de la page 3, étape suivante, il a été dit que c'est une liste flexible qui est susceptible d'être révisée, affinée. Donc là, ça laisse quand même la porte à l'amélioration qu'on voudra faire, eu égard à la pratique, c'est-à-dire à la mise à l'œuvre. Bon, mais sinon, il y a une question que je voudrais poser à partir de l'annexe là, de 8.
à partir de l'annexe 8 vers jusqu'à la page, je crois que 15, 16, 17, il a été dit sous les indicateurs théorie des changements. On voit théorie des changements à partir de la page 8, 9, c'est jusqu'à la page 11 qu'on voit les explications de cette théorie. Et je crois que les explications même varient. Hein, on a dit théorie, bon, je ne sais pas quelle théorie du changement. Bon, on a quand même expliqué dans certains cas, mais dans d'autres, on a simplement mis. Est-ce que c'est pour affiner, pour trouver encore des définitions, ou bien là, je vois que les définitions varient. Hein, donc, à partir de la page 11, alors, j'aimerais demander à l'équipe si c'est un travail achevé, parce que là, c'est soumis à l'adoption. Une fois adopté, je pense que je vous remercie.
Sense that I see no problems about the 3 steps or 3 recommendations, but then I just want to recommend to the working group or whoever is going to look after it, in the sense that what I see missing here is how do you actually apply these things on the ground, in the sense when there are differences in countries. For example, let me think about timelines. Now, how long does it take to build a judiciary? Because if I'm like 1 year old, like South Sudan, and if I'm 10 years old, or if I'm 30 years old, we have different stages. So how do I apply this? Because if I'm 1 year old, then I'm looking for input indicators, like how much have I invested in the judicial system? How many judges am I educating? Because it takes like a few years to get the judges on board. So what are we measuring here? So there is this input indicators versus output indicators. When do you actually do output? In my mind, I'm just thinking back about the fragility spectrum. I think the fragility spectrum had 5 levels: crisis, recovery, transition, something else. What was peace? No, transformation and resilience. So in there, I think the countries were describing themselves that if I'm in crisis, this is how I look like. I have lots of refugees, I don't have institutions, I have my army fighting my police and stuff like that. So what kind of indicators will I use to measure me from crisis to recovery, from recovery to transformation under PSG 1, inclusive politics? Many countries probably wouldn't even have a parliament. And so what are they doing? So that's the stuff that you have to think about, and I think this work is already leading us to that stage of questioning this now, and that's very positive already. And so if we take back, but we have to ask these questions down on the ground, then it will be applicable. But we have to do serious work here on the ground. I'm not even talking about political acceptance. I'm talking about practical means of applying. So I would say perhaps in that 3 stages, we say that, okay, let's see which one can work and which one cannot, and let's feed back properly why it doesn't work. And at the end of the day, in my view, I feel like you will have those 5 stages and you have a menu of indicators. So if I'm on crisis stage, I will use the crisis indicators, which most likely will be input indicators. Input indicator from level 1 to level probably 4. Resilience is when you start looking at output indicators. And you can do perception surveys. If I just finish off in one sentence, it's like, I always question this. I go, if I'm 1 year old or 2 years old or 5 years old or 10 years old, I don't have a judicial system, why would I do a survey to ask my citizens, are they happy with my judicial system? I'm setting myself for failure. So I wouldn't do peace here. I would actually create problems. So that's what we have to be kind of careful. And actually it's good that we are at this stage where we can clearly question all these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Definitely how long time, where you are, is going to influence how you are going to use the indicators. But let's hear some responses from our key experts here, Nguyen, Francesca.
Mon ami du Tchad, ce que vous avez vu dans les annexes ne sont que des résumés des différents documents qui ont été présentés. Notamment, donc j'avais fait allusion dans ma présentation, on avait développé un cadre d'analyse dimension par dimension pour la matrice de la fragilité, pour permettre de faire justement l'évaluation de la fragilité. Alors ce cadre d'analyse pour chaque dimension de la fragilité précisait quelles étaient les théories de changement et quels étaient les principaux drivers, les principaux causes des conflits avec les théories et les suppositions. Donc, on n'a pas pu tout mettre dans ce document qui est en fait un document de synthèse qui reprend les points essentiels, mais je vous invite à partager, à consulter le cadre analytique de l'évaluation de la fragilité où toutes les théories de changement, dimension par dimension, de la matrice de la fragilité sont inclus dedans. Regarding the Emilia Perez, our co-chair, suggestions, thank you very much, because we had long discussion in the working group regarding that. And we really think that, that one of the next steps, one of the first things that we should be doing when we're finalizing this menu of indicators is to take the stage of fragility into account. Some of those indicators, you're right, are going to be very stage specific, but other can actually, is some indicator that's going to be throughout all the 5 stages of fragility. And it's true, I have to say also at the G7 plus level, we really need to work on the fragility spectrum itself as a tool to really, now we have 5 cases that we can study throughout and finalize also the definition of each stage, which is something that we started to do in Dili last year, but we never had a chance to continue. So I think that it's up to us, the G7 Plus, to really refine this tool in a way to convey what we want to convey with that. And Ankian, do you want to add something?
No, actually, you did very well. I completely agree.
As a dynamic duo. I think this is a very important discussion. I'm crucially aware that we're also a little bit short of time now because this room is kind of running out in a technical sense at 6 o'clock. And we have one more item to cover. But let's hear from Italy and then see if we can move forward.
In the last years, and I may mention a few principles that have been guiding, of course, our work in the last period of time, which is a good humanitarian donorship principle, the EU agenda for change, and the fact that the Italian development cooperation guidelines that we have recently approved. This is a document, a programming document that sets the lines of Italian development cooperation from 2003 to 2015. So this is a 3-year document. Does have a specific focus on items that fall fully within the New Deal mentality and approach. And of course, the same holds true for ECD principles for good international engagement in fragile states. This has been part and parcel of the new lines of Italian development cooperation. And especially remarking that there are for specific financing in the cases of the participation to peace and stabilization processes. This usually goes together with small packages of aid. Having said that, as somebody who has deliberately not taken the floor in the first part, just to go and see what the second part had to offer, my overall impression is that this is a forum of great importance in terms of circulation of ideas. And this is something that I will take back. The level is high, and the support and the presence of ministers tells the story. At the same time, let us not forget that we have heard that times and again, it's not much if you talk the talk, but if you walk the walk. And awkwardly, sometimes you may have walked the walk, and you may have not talked the talk. So we try to do, of course, our best into following up. We were one of those who were more enthusiastic in Busan when the dialogue, when there was engagement to make the dialogue. And one last impression after the afternoon session, keep it simple. I don't know if there are people around the table that follow the beautiful game of basketball. By the way, Italy is no longer a very strong team, but there are those statistics, and they're important. Is the collection of data, measurements, indexes. And then there is something else that for those who follow basketball is easy to understand. It is called the intangibles. Those are those things that are not measurable, and you may get those right and the indexes wrong and still be doing a great job. So let us not overemphasize that, even if this comes, as I was saying, just from somebody who brings a testimony to a group that we are not as engaged maybe as others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very good to have you on board, and thank you for your commitment and support for the agenda. It's much appreciated. Now, can I try to conclude that, of course, we understand that the G7 plus countries have to refine the fragility spectrum, the definitions, and that the fragility spectrum will influence also the use of the indicators. That's a common understanding that we have, as Emilia expressed it. But on this background, and with this as an additional kind of emphasis, can we then agree on the next steps proposed by the group, the steps described on page 3 in the document, to now move welcoming the interim list, piloting, further developing, and also working together and learning how this can become a very useful instrument for the New Deal implementation. Is that something we can agree on? Yes, done. Very good step, very important, and a good achievement of our discussions now today. And thank you again to the group and to the dynamic duo for taking us forward. We have another dynamic duo now, which is the New Deal implementation and monitoring duo. Can I pass it over to Ms. Ali Gillis and then Mr.
Last piece of the last session, while half of the room is suffering from jet lag. And I wish Mustafa Arya was here, because he worked more on this issue, and since he didn't get his visa, so I have to present it. But in any case, just let me remind all of our colleagues that in Haiti and South Sudan, we all agreed that the New Deal is a set of interconnected principles. And isolating them will create problems when we are implementing it. We also recognized that the need to scaling up our efforts to work on the implementation of the focus and trust principles are important. During the South Sudan and Haiti, we also recognize that there is a demand coming from the countries for important issues such as developing compact role of the lead donor and equally important monitoring framework, which namely the trust indicators that you just mentioned. This is the area where we can measure the progress and on our commitment under the New Deal. And as a co-chair, I have to admit that we are behind the schedule of this important work, and thus we need to focus very strongly on this. And I would like to also highlight that the work that my co-chair Ali will present is still in progress, and we need to have further, we will have further discussion on this. And today we would like to only present it to you for your initial feedback and guidance. So now just giving the floor to Ali, my co-chair.
Thank you very much. I have to just say that I'm a very lucky co-chair because I have not one but three wonderful Afghani partners. I have Habib, I have Mustafa, and I have Dr. Mastour, and they operate entirely seamlessly, so I'm a very lucky co-chair. So our task is to present those three papers. They're available at the back of the room. The first is the proposal for a monitoring process on the New Deal and developing the indicators for focus and trust. The second is a paper on the role of the lead development partners. And the third is guidance on country compacts. First of all, on the monitoring and the focus and trust work, the first and most important thing for me to say about that at this stage is that at this stage, that paper is only a proposal. It is still draft. It will go through further processes to gain agreement. So it will go to our working group on implementation, to the G7 Plus and the INCAF groups, and to CSOs. And we will have to work hard to make sure that all those thoughts are incorporated. Just to reiterate that this focus and trust work goes to the heart of the changed behaviours that we all desire to see, and those behaviours are required on all sides. It's about building partnerships, and I think we all understand that that is a process that is constant. We must never take partnership for granted. The paper will actually propose a questionnaire using data mostly from existing sources and building on existing processes for the most part, and it also proposes a voluntary country-based peer review. I commend the paper to you. It's a very good start, but there will be many thoughts to add to it. So that's for us to be aware of as a future process coming up. The second of the papers is the one on the role of lead partners. This one is for us to note, I think, because it's gone through a big consultation process through the INCAF, through G7 Plus. We've had comments from all sorts of different avenues. It arose actually from a meeting of lead partners, an informal meeting of lead development partners, in which it became horribly obvious that we were all in our various ways sitting back, not wanting to, and we were wanting to respect the G7 Plus government leadership role and perhaps not taking the appropriate roles ourselves. We realised that we needed some help on what it was that we needed to do. So we achieved consensus on a number of things. I commend the paper to you, especially to all lead donors, but to all of those who are participating in the New Deal. It's a very important document. The consensus, I won't go through it in detail, but I think the most important thing that G7 Plus expects from development partners who are leading is for us to model the New Deal behaviour, especially trust. And at the headquarters, for us to be pushing for the reforms and to be pushing for the field and headquarters to be communicating with each other. Can I just take a quick detour from my role now as co-chair of the working group, just to note that as co-chair with the World Bank on the INCAF task team, that we have development partners have been working on a number of different dimensions to support the reforms that we need to undertake as part of our commitment. We have voluntarily identified a range of reforms that each of us needs to take forward, and we are going to be holding each other accountable for those. Anybody who is interested in that process that the INCAF members have undertaken, we'd be very happy to provide you with information. I think that we will have the next one, for instance, the next thing that we will do is have a side meeting on using country systems, to which G7 Plus and CSO representatives will be invited to attend, and I'm hoping that we will get out of that some joint work that we might be able to do. I think too that there may be some potential for the development partners in INCAF to go beyond that voluntary commitment of a range of 10 items for us to identify 2 or 3 which we want to jointly really cut through on. I'd be very interested in feedback from INCAF members about your appetite for that, but I think it's something that we really need to do. The third document that I draw your attention to is the guidance on country compacts. This is a concept that I think is driving a number of people nuts. I think this paper is a good opportunity for us to try and, it's an attempt to try and bring it to some clarity. It's had broad consultation. It was considered by the steering group in Juba, and there has been further work on it by the G7 Plus. It tries to answer the question, what is a transition compact? And the answer there is that it's both an instrument and a process, and it's about reaching agreement on priorities for collective effort. It's not the same as the government's full development strategy. It's the subset of things that government and partners need to do to collaborate. What do we need to collaborate on? So it will be different in every country. It's a framework for coordinating political, security, development efforts, etc., all over the short term. It's a framework for joint risk management. The compact will evolve, and over time it will become more inclusive. And importantly, it's about matching our priorities to the available resources. I think there's a sort of a circular thing that happens there, which is what are the available resources, and once we see what the priorities are and all agree on them, it may in fact generate additional resources. So that's, I hope that that work on compacts helps all the pilot countries as you embark on the next phase. So that's the 3 documents. 2, for us to note the lead development partners role and the guidance on country compacts, and the proposal for monitoring, focus and trust goes through for an additional process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we just heard from Ali, we have 2 documents, the transition compacts and the role of lead development partners in pilot countries, were background documents prepared as useful instruments, guidance into how we can improve our work and how we can develop compacts and how the development partners can do better. Those are for background, not for adoption, not for discussion, but for background and further, of course, elaboration. But then we have the one document that we, on the monitoring the implementation of the New Deal for engagement in fragile states, and in that document you have the group's proposed next steps, and that's what we're going to approve. Isn't that correctly understood? We're going to approve the next steps on page 4 in the bottom of the document. That's what we ask you to endorse, namely, or to discuss it here, then to share it, the draft monitoring proposal, share it for members by comments in May, move forward and then further discuss and hopefully endorse at the next New Deal implementation working group in June or July, anyway, the next meeting. And then also continue to explore the synergies between the monitoring processes for global reporting. That's kind of what the group recommends that we endorse. So there's further work to be done.
Yes.
Any comments for this? Then I think we should thank Australia and Afghanistan for the work done, and we look forward to seeing the next steps taken. It is important, we heard again and again in our panel discussions, that we need to have clear also indicators to measure focus and trust and how well we are doing on these issues. So this is important work. Thank you to the group. And then I will thank on my part from a very good participation, very good preparations. I would also echo that to the secretariats. I think they do.
I think on behalf of both co-chairs, we would like to thank all of you for your active participation in this meeting. And again, reiterate the thanks to the Secretariat, Donata in special, and the team for all this work. And then I believe Morton and Elder for keeping tabs on both the ministers and making sure that we could speak to each other. Co-chairs for all of the working groups for all your excellent work so far. So, and last but not least, not last but not least yet, the interpreters and everybody else, the logistical people. Last but not least is the host of the country for hosting us here in Washington. So thank you very much, everybody.